Okay, well, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Thank everyone for being here. We have a really full agenda today, so I'm going to really jump right into it. I'll say really a lot about chairman introductions for after our first presentation.
Everyone's paper seats, we'll go ahead and get started. The second half of the morning session. Just have a few brief comments for the chairman report today. First order of business is to welcome our newest commission member, Pete Killings, who I think the man that needs really no introduction to folks in this room. He's the president and CEO of Metro Atlanta, 30+ years of career experience in EMS, and has been a longstanding member on the EMS subcommittee. So I think people hit the ground running with a lot of information. This is not his first rodeo. Is jumping on the commission. So welcome, Pete. We're glad you're here, and welcome aboard.
My pleasure.
Also, with that being said, Dr. Jay Smith, as you know, one of our other commission members, has rotated off. I'd like to thank him for his 4 years of service in an ER position. He brought a fresh perspective from that, particular specialty to our commission, and I can always count on Jay to work on projects and things, and was always very supportive of the commission. He could not be here today to receive his plaque and recognition, but we'll make sure that he gets that. And then finally, this day, third Thursday in November, is recognized as nationally as Rural Health Day. It's just great that it worked out that on this national day, as a state, we have focused on rural Georgia and our level 4 centers. So really just great timing and focus for our rural community. I hope they feel empowered and a significant part of the team, as we really put a lot of focus on them in the last year or two. Also, we've combined meetings longer today because we've combined all these initiatives into our annual meeting. I'm sure the commission members will be glad that usually during the annual meeting, we have to look back at bylaws, and now we changed that before we went into the year. So no bylaws over there. So that being said, we'll move into our next report. It's from the Georgia Rural Health Innovation Center. Ms. Linda Grant. Linda, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm awfully proud to be here and be able to speak with you today on National Rural Health Day. I'm Glenda Grant. I'm from the Georgia Rural Health Innovation Center. It was placed at Mercer University because our goals closely align. We work with the 120 rural communities in underserved Georgia for healthcare. But we work with everybody, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do today. Maybe. So you got it, okay. We practice that, y'all. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Innovation Center. We were actually established in our state agency in 2018. We were established by House Bill 769 by the legislature and tasked to be a partner with rural Georgia to improve healthcare through research and sustainable solutions in healthcare. Next. So what does that mean? There was very little language in the legislation about actually what we do. And I'll talk about one thing in particular that was put in the legislation that we do. But mainly we work with the 120 rural communities, and those are counties. We use the state definition. Those are counties in Georgia that have a population less than 50,000. And so we research healthcare access, health disparities and health outcomes, and then we partner with local organizations, whether they be government, nonprofit entities in the community, schools, and then we implement projects that build the healthcare infrastructure and then have healthcare capacity for the communities. Next. So a little bit about what that looks like. I said, you know, I could talk about the center all day long. And my mom always said I was a talker, that I had been vaccinated with a Victrola needle. But talking shortly about what we do is very, very difficult. And so I'm going to highlight just a few of the programs. If you get anything from what I talk about today, it is please go to the website, check out the things that we're doing, check out our data hub, and give us a call. I tell everyone in the center, we never say no. We may say, I haven't done that before, give me a minute, but we never say no. So please give us a call. But one of the programs that came to us was pediatric mental health program. During the pandemic, when children were out of school, we had a school system call us up and tell us that their students were really suffering with isolation, mental health issues, wellness issues. And so we began looking at why, and how do we get them help? And that's when we started surveying for mental health counseling for children and adolescents in rural communities. About half of them do not have any kind of counseling. And we set the bar pretty low. It was just 1 day a week, 1 day for any kind of counseling service. As you can see from the map, half of our counties don't have that. You can go to the next slide. So we started asking why. Well, it wasn't because they didn't want to or the CSBs weren't working. It's because they didn't have the people to do it. They didn't have people in rural communities, so they were lacking the workforce to do that. So we began thinking, how do we fix this? How do we put together a program that supports the workforce? And we began looking at, what does that really mean? Do we not have enough people graduating from programs, going through programs? Well, we do. But there was a real barrier in that once they're finished with their training and they get out, then they need supervised hours, and thousands of those. They cannot see people and get reimbursement for their training and the work that they do because they need these supervised hours. They have to pay for the supervised hours. So we bleed out mental health professionals and behavioral health professionals in our state because they get other jobs because they have to go on and live to work. And so it's very difficult for them to get those hours. So we made a system in this pediatric mental health program where we could offer free supervised hours to these professionals that need this license and this supervision, and also see students in rural communities in their schools by telehealth for free. So it married up both needs of workforce and needing access to mental health services. And so we began that in Ben Hill. We began the pilot with them. It was very, very successful. And so we've unfolded that into all of that. The minute people started hearing about that, we started getting calls from New Hampshire and Virginia and many other states saying, hey, we want to do that too. We were not quite prepared for how great an idea that was. And it wasn't mine, so I can say that. But it met two needs tremendously. And so it began to then snowball. So we're in all counties in Ben Hill right now. We're in Washington. We're actually ahead of schedule. We're in all schools in Washington County now. Jefferson will begin their pilot school. We always stress to communities, enroll one school first. Let's work out the bugs, because if you've seen one rural community, you've seen one rural community. One rural hospital works like only one rural hospital. One school system works like only one school system. So we tell them, do one school, pick your school where you think you'll have the most success, where you've got the best support. Let's work out the bugs, and then we move to all of them. So Jefferson will begin then in the fall. Then we look to start in Harris County. They're actually going to start in January. They were very excited and went out and got funding to go ahead and get that in all of their schools. So we're going to pilot them in January as well. And then we're looking to expand that to Twiggs, Hancock, and Upson County. You can go to the next slide. I believe it talks about. Let me put this caveat in there. In doing this, we have lots and lots of schools that have need, but we need supervisors because there are very few supervisors in the state of Georgia. And so that's one thing that we're working on, is to provide a free clinic through the center so that other schools can participate. We've been approached by University of Georgia and also Valdosta for their LCSW programs to get that supervision to actually be supervisors for us so that more of their folks can get in there and get into the workforce. So we're working to establish that free clinic, and then we'll move into all schools in the state of Georgia that have licensing programs. So the next thing is community health reporter. And I know Nita's going to talk a little bit about the need and workforce issues. But one thing that's very difficult is to get your arms around what doctors are practicing in rural Georgia. And a lot of times it may be nurse practitioners or PAs, but they function as physicians. And so it's difficult in rural communities to get your arms around what the access really is. And we began working on this. You cannot only use licensing data because it has all doctors in there. whether they practice in that community or not. And so it can be difficult for people who actually live there to find a physician and have access to that physician. And so we began looking at that. We had our rural health reporters to travel to the 120 counties, but we found as soon as they left, something might change. A doctor in this community may decide to have a day here in this clinic, or they may stop seeing patients there and may put a nurse practitioner or PA there a different day. And so we were frustrated. How do we give great access that's almost live information? We thought we turned to the people who live and work there. We need to incentivize people on the ground to give us that data about what services are available in their community. And so we came up with the Community Health Reporter. We have an app that's GIS stamped. We have community health reporters that travel, that live and work really in the 120 rural communities. And they go and they talk to the physician, and they talk to the nurse practitioner, and they talk to the health department in the hospitals and ask them what services they have, if they're seeing new patients, if they take this insurance, if they take Medicare, all of those things, so that then we can clean it, make sure it's accurate, do some quality control on it, and then turn it around on our data hub on our website so that people in the community can go click on their county and see what care is available in their county. It's updated twice a month, so it's as real time as we can get it until we can get some AI out there to gather it continuously for us. Next. Another project that Dr. Ann Montgomery, and she is a jewel who is in the center and works with us. She and her PhD students, we have a rural health PhD through Mercer, but those PhD students work in our center part-time as they go through their program. So it provides the program for free for them, a PhD for free for them. And so they do a lot of work for us. And they began looking at farmer mental health and suicide rates. And the more they looked, the more difficult it was for them to find good data and very comprehensive data. And so they set out to do a comprehensive well-being project to gather great data. You can go to the next. So they wanted to talk to everyone involved. They wanted to talk to not only farm workers and farm owners, but also farm spouses. And so I believe the biggest study before theirs had 88 participants. They had 1,600 participants, 1,651, and you can see the breakdown there. And we were very proud of this study, but we were not expecting what we saw. And it was devastating, honestly, devastating. When you look at the healthcare access in the bottom corner, I'm not sure if it's on your right or left, 60% have no access to basic medical care. Then 50% have no health insurance. If you don't have access, you don't go. And especially if you're a farmer, because you can't leave. You cannot take a whole day. You don't have that luxury. You don't have that kind of life. And so they don't receive care. And then as we began looking there, we saw suicidal ideation and negative effect. If you look in the middle, at least once a month, 47% had loneliness, 49% sadness, 39% hopelessness, and then 29% thoughts of dying by suicide, and 42% had thoughts about dying by suicide the past 12 months. Then, as if that is not bad enough, if you look in the top corner, the generational status, then we started looking at first generation farmers, that the news is worse for them. First generation farmers, they had higher stress levels, fewer coping mechanisms, and that's not healthy coping mechanisms, that's just all coping mechanisms, but they had fewer of them. They had less healthcare access than the 60%. And the real thing that kind of punched us in the gut, 61% had thought about dying in the past year versus 10% of generational farmers, 61%. 9% thought about it daily. That's a real pandemic. That's a problem. And when you think about Georgia, how much of Georgia is agriculture, how much we depend on our farmers and cattlemen and ranchers, it's devastating. It is devastating information. You can go to the next. So we began to put together, in response to that, one of my favorite things is in talking with legislators is we tell them the research that we do, and then the next thing out of their mouth, what are you gonna do about it? And so we've put together in response to that, with our partners, and we have many of them, and we're very grateful. We did not do this work alone, and so we can't take all the credit for that. We've put together a alliance, a Georgia Wellness Alliance that is meeting the needs, and we are planning initiatives and things to meet the needs of those farmers, agricultural workers, and ranchers in Georgia. And that's a UGA, Georgia Farm Bureau, us, and many others that are coming together to put together formalized help for our farmers, because they desperately need it, and they needed it yesterday. So I can't tell you about in the 15 minutes everything that we do, although I'd love to. But these are some of the other programs that we work on in our communities. Just not a comprehensive list. You see the Trauma Commission training, that's part of the March Pause that we're working with Courtney and his team on. We're very proud to be a part of that work. You can go to the next one. Some of the things that we're working on for the future, we're working with to expand rural pediatric networks and strengthen rural pediatricians, and we're putting together a plan for that. Something we're very excited about, and we just learned from our partner, the Christopher Wolf Crusade, yesterday, that they've been awarded $1 million grant, and all $1 million of that is to go to rural hospitals to put an opioid misuse project. She has developed, because of the death of her son, who was Christopher, by opioid overdose. She has put together a fantastic program, and I love the way she said it. You have a coach for everything. You have a coach for everything in life, but you don't have a coach for healthcare, and you don't have a coach for pain management. And that can be very difficult for your average person. And they have done some work in Atlanta, and we just thought this could be life-changing and tremendous for the whole community if we begin to do this work in rural hospitals. And so we're very excited. I said 3. Dr. Sumner keeps saying 5. We'll see who wins. I have a feeling it'll be her, especially now that the $1 million has materialized to get that work done. But we're very excited about that. We're also starting a pilot in the new year with an OBGYN, part of our maternal health focus. We have students go into rural communities that are interested in OBGYN and look at problems in the communities and then come up with innovative solutions. And a few of them have come up with some really great ideas for models that would work in communities where the rural hospital cannot afford to keep open their labor and delivery unit. If you want to see something shocking, look at those numbers. People are still having babies, but there are very few labor and delivery units in rural Georgia. The hospitals can't afford to lose $1 million on a labor and delivery unit and keep their doors open. And so we're beginning to look at how do we increase prenatal care? How do we get the care to the people who actually need it? How do we overcome barriers that we can't fix, like poverty and health literacy, to go to them when they need the care? And so that's another project that we're working on. Next. So if you've heard anything or you think a thought, hey, I'd like to do this in rural Georgia, I have an interest, please give us a call. Again, we always say, we never say no, we just say we haven't done it yet, but we'll get busy. So thank you.
Thank you, Glenda. A lot of great work. We appreciate the support of the Rural Innovation Center. Okay, we'll move into the State Office of Rural Health now. You see the theme here of rural health as we continue today. Nita Ham, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I tend to travel around while I'm speaking, so if you don't mind, I'm going to do that. I also have gotten so old I have to stand far enough away from the screen that I can see what's on it. So I am very excited to be here. I am Nita Ham from the State Office of Rural Health, and I think we're getting our slides up there. Thank you, by the way, so much for having me here today and giving me the opportunity to tell you a little bit about our office. I have been working at the State Office of Rural Health for about 9 years, and I actually left the Atlanta area and moved down to a rural community. When I became an employee of the State Office of Rural Health, I absolutely love it. While I loved the urban life in the big cities, I traded the traffic for the gnats, and I'm not sure which is more aggravating on some days. I think the gnats tend to win every now and then. But again, I'm the senior director at the State Office of Rural Health, and I'm over the SOAR program, the State Office of Rural Health Program and Hospital Services. Next slide, please. So the State Office of Rural Health is actually positioned under the Department of Community Health. So this is our obligatory mission slide for the Department of Community Health. You can go on to the next slide, please. And as Dr. Ashley said, today is actually National Rural Health Day. So we're really excited to be here on this day. And I want to wish everyone out there who's in rural communities and works on behalf of rural communities a happy National Rural Health Day. Next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit of understanding about the state offices of rural health. So the HRSA actually manages our program. So the Health Resources and Services Administration is the parent. They're the ones who provide the funding for state offices of rural health. And in 1987, the Federal Office of Rural Health Policy was actually established to work on behalf of a lot of rural hospitals that were struggling back then. So we were having a lot of rural hospital closures even in the 80s, and that's how the FORHP came about. And then in 1991, they actually established the State Office of Rural Health, or the SOAR program. So there is a SOAR program, a SOAR office in all 50 states, and the governor of those states, at the time the office comes about, designates the site that's going to host the State Office of Rural Health. So our office came to be in 2000, and our governor at that time decided that it would be under the Department of Community Health, and then DCH actually decided to position us in a rural community, which was really a great idea to have us working in the communities and living in the communities that we actually serve. Next slide, please. Cordele, by the way, is about an hour directly south of here. So if I'm sure if you're headed to Florida, you've passed through. Our office is not too far off the interstate, so if you ever want to come visit, just let us know. Just to give you a little bit of an idea about our office in particular, we have 4 program sections in the office: the SOAR program, hospital services, the primary care office, and the farm worker health program. We're a small staff. We have 10 of us in the office, 1 executive director, 2 senior directors, 2 program directors, and then we have 5 support staff who actually divide themselves amongst us and support us. Next slide, please. So to give you a little bit of an idea of what we do. So HRSA and the Federal Office of Rural Health Policy, as they established our program in our offices, placed us in rural communities to help rural communities within their states to build effective healthcare delivery systems. And SOAR, Federal Office of the FORP office, actually set up our objectives for us. So all 50 states work to meet these objectives: collecting and disseminating health-related information, coordinating state rural health resources and activities, providing technical assistance, encouraging the recruiting and retention of health professionals, and strengthening state, local, and federal partnerships. So that's our marching orders, and then how we do that depends on the relationships that the state offices build within their state and how they choose to address those particular objectives. Next slide, please. So to tell you a little bit about our office, as we compare ourselves with other SOAR offices around the country, I have to say that the Georgia SOAR office is very fortunate when we look at some of the stress and the struggles and the funding limitations of SOAR offices in other states, because we are very blessed to have a supportive governor and all of the support we have from the legislatures. So our management, the dollars that we manage year to year changes a little bit, but in fiscal year 2022, we actually had $42 million of funding that came through our office, both in federal or state funds. Each of our program sections, those 4 program sections, manages 1 or more federal programs. And then we have a long list of state funded programs that we manage within our office. So in 2022, we had 52 individual grants that were managed by the staff in those 4 sections. And again, they were federal, they were legislated. The majority of the programs are actually legislatively directed. So the funding actually shows up in our state SOAR office budget. And we distribute those funds a couple of different ways. Every now and then, the legislators will actually tell us who the funding goes to. Or they may just tell us the purpose of the funds, and then we have to put an application out for the to apply for the funding, and then the grantees are decided through that application process. If we do the request for grant application, we refer to that as an RFGA, and that is sort of, for those of you that are familiar with federal programs, that's sort of the equivalent, the Georgia equivalent of a NOFO. And so the DCH website has a page for those of you who may be interested in monitoring the DCH website. There is a site on there for grants administration, and when we have grants available, that's where they post it. So from time to time, there's various grants for various reasons that will be posted on that website. And I'm telling you that for a reason, because at the end of the presentation, I'm going to alert you to a couple of particular programs that we have going. So you go ahead and go to the next slide, please. We are really excited about all that we do and the programs that we manage. So who do we work for? Linda Tori gave you a little bit of a hint earlier because she used this slide. This is a wonderful graphic of the state of Georgia showing all 159 counties, and the ones that are shaded in blue are actually those defined as rural, which has a population, a county population of less than 50,000. So when you look at this map, all of the blue counties, that's our target area, because those are the folks that we work to support. And you can see that there's a huge number of counties that are rural, and a lot of those, the majority of those in the lower half of the state are actually defined as rural. So next slide, please. I'm going to take this map one step further, and I'm going to show you the map that indicates not only the counties, but the counties that have small rural and critical access hospitals in them. What stands out the most is that I'm also showing you by way of this map the counties in Georgia that do not have a hospital located in those counties. So 120 counties out of 159 are rural. We have 67 small rural and critical access hospitals. There are 54 counties in Georgia that have no hospital, 9 counties in Georgia that have only one practicing physician, and another 9 counties in Georgia that have no physician at all. So when you take a look at this map and you look at those clusters of red X's, and you see how many clusters of counties and how much geography in Georgia is nowhere close to a hospital, then I think it's very easy for us to understand the importance of a strong EMS system and some standardized trauma patient management education across the board. Because in these counties where there are no hospitals and possibly not even any physicians, EMS is their go-to when they need health care. And then when EMS needs to transfer a patient or transport a patient to a hospital for stabilization and potentially transfer to another, they have a lot of land mass they have to travel to get there. So it's extremely important that we partner together to strengthen the EMS programs and to provide trauma education across the board. Next slide, please. So I had mentioned earlier to you about some of the grant programs that we manage, and I'm going to tell you about one that's a pretty high-profile program, and that's the Rural Hospital Stabilization Grant Program. So in 2014, then Governor Deal actually was concerned about the number of rural hospital closures in Georgia. If you think to the map that I just showed you, how many areas are without hospitals, imagine the concern we have when even the remaining hospitals are on the brink of closure. So between 2010 and 2014, Georgia was actually leading the charge across the state, across the country with rural hospital closures. We were closing more hospitals during that period of time than any other state, and Governor Deal got concerned about that. So we put a committee together to explore the root causes of these hospital closures. The result of that committee was the Rural Hospital Stabilization Grant Program, And that actually began in fiscal year 2016. So we're in our 7th phase of this program. There has been to date a $39 million investment. 34 of our 67 small rural and critical access hospitals have participated in at least one phase of funding, some of them in more than one phase. And the focus of this program just simply is to keep these hospitals open. We want to improve the quality of care. We want to make sure that they expand their market share, that they are providing good quality care to those residents, and that they're prepared for whatever rolls in their doors. So one of the reasons I wanted to mention this program is because our office manages this grant, and we work with a lot of hospitals every year. Last year was my largest number of hospitals to date, and that was 16 hospitals participating in one year, and I've got 10 now that are currently participating in phase 7. But our goal is to provide whatever kind of support we can provide through these grant funds that is specific to the hospital's needs to strengthen their ability to provide quality care to their residents. So we want to make sure that we do whatever we can to help them address their areas of needs. We work very closely with all of our hospitals, but specifically with these, we get down in the weeds with them. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because we really get to know these hospitals. We get to know the people in the hospitals, the hospital leadership. We know their communities. We know what we need. And what's really important, I think, is that we also know how to communicate with them. And sometimes that takes a little extra attention because we are rural. So we know how to communicate with our rural hospitals. And the benefit of all this is that working so closely with them, we can bring back to groups like this what their needs and their challenges are so that we can work together to try to address those. So this is a great program, but it gives us a lot of good information and solid connections with the leadership within these hospitals so we can identify their needs. Next slide, please. So one of the things on that list of requirements for SOAR offices was to strengthen partnerships. And I've listed a couple of our great partners on this particular slide. We work closely with the Georgia Hospital Association. We provide a lot of funding to our partners too to address some of these areas. We work closely with GHA. We work with Glenda and the Rural Health Innovation Center, and I am very blessed to work with her. It's a great partnership. And when they came to be, the funding for their office was actually put into our budget. So our office manages the funding for the Innovation Center, and I take advantage of that. Every time I need something for Glenda, I remind her that I'm her the manager of her grant, so I can make sure she'll answer the phone when I call. We also work very closely with Georgia Southern University. They've been a great partner in doing needs assessments for us through the years. They, being in the middle of a rural area and surrounded by rural counties, also have a great grasp on rural needs. So we work with them a lot for these needs assessments. And then we work with the Department of Public Health and have a special close relationship with the State Office of EMS. I enjoy that relationship because that's actually my background. I spent about 35 years in EMS before I went to the State Office of Rural Health. And when the NHTSA visit was occurring, Mike reached out to me and asked if I would put some information together for them. So I did. I sat down one night and I started looking through the files so that I could put this information together. And even though I manage most of the grants that support EMS, even I was shocked when I looked at what we've partnered with and what we've accomplished with the State Office of EMS through the years. So in the last 10 years, just the last 10 years, our office has funded over $13 million of EMS-related grants and projects. And I was really surprised that the funding had been, and that's dedicated specifically to EMS support, whether it's EMS projects or EMS education. So I was really very pleased when I saw that number because that's a lot of support for the State Office of EMS through the years and for EMS programs. So obviously our office sees the importance of a strong EMS system since they are very often the first point of healthcare access in our rural areas. Next slide, please. We also have a strong partnership with the Trauma Commission. And Liz and Courtney and I have monthly rural-focused meetings, which is wonderful for us to get on a virtual meeting and talk specifically about rural needs. I see Gina back there. I was sitting by her. We are also in discussion with Gina and GQuIP and the Mercer Innovation Center about some rural surgery quality improvement initiatives. So our office stands in support of that, and we're ready to move forward when we identify some particular initiatives we want to address. We have been available to Courtney and to Liz as they have been putting March Pause together to work with them in any way that we need. And we also have, our office participates in the level 3, level 4 Rural Trauma Center committee meetings. And then we are preparing for the January meeting that's coming up with the Trauma Systems Consultative Visit and Rural Focused Review. Next slide, please. The last thing I want to mention is a couple of our grants. In addition to working with Liz and Courtney, I've also been working with Cheryl with the Trauma Foundation. We had worked with the Trauma Foundation as a grantee 3 or 4 years ago, I guess, when we funded the EMS workforce study. And then last year, Cheryl and I got together and started looking at another grant-funded project to create a continuing education instructor database. So I had this idea a couple of years ago in an effort to address the needs of our rural providers who don't have a lot of access to good quality continuing education. Most of the time it's because those CE programs are actually done in larger urban areas, and it's very challenging for our rural emergency department staff and rural providers and rural EMS folks to be able to leave their areas for any length of time to attend this training. And it's also very expensive. Most of our rural hospitals don't have the funds to reimburse the staff for their time, their travel, their registration fees. And most of the hospitals do not incentivize their staff to pursue continuing education credentials for anything beyond their job description requirements. So I started thinking about bringing the training to the rural areas because it's very, very necessary that, or it's very needed that we provide it to our rural partners, but how do we get it to them? They can't really leave and go find the training on their own. So I thought, what about a traveling training show? So I started thinking about that, and we're doing this in 2 parts. Cheryl is developing our database so that we are actually working to address reaching out to instructors of all different types of programs to see if they're interested in participating in some outreach education. And if they're willing, then we're adding their names into the database. The database has been set up so that we're it's a wide variety of continuing education programs, advanced trauma life support, RTTBC classes, TNCC, ENPC. So we're creating a big database to put all of the instructors and the coordinators into the database. And then the next piece of this comes the traveling training show. So this is where we are now. That RFGA should be dropping pretty soon. I'm hoping that it'll be out next week. And as soon as it is available on the website, I'm going to alert everybody that it's there so you can go take a look at it in case any of your institutions may be interested in pursuing this. But we will be providing the funding for a grantee who will coordinate and deliver these quality education courses in our rural communities. So it may be a grantee that's in a larger urban area that has the resources, the equipment, the vehicles that can pull it all together and take our training show on the road. And then we'll be working with different hospitals in different areas of the state to determine what classes do they need and who will host the classes. And then the traveling training show will move into those areas and unfold those classes so that our rural providers have easy access. We want them to have the training. We feel like whether they decide they want to pursue a trauma center designation or a stroke or STEMI center designation, or if they just want the education to strengthen the funded knowledge and skill set for their ED staff, it's important to us to make that training available. So we will be working with the Department of Community Health over the next couple of months to identify that grantee. We're hoping to have the grantee identified by the first of the year. And then that grantee will be able to kick off our training show and tap into the database so that they can easily access the instructors who are willing to go on the road with them and deliver the training to these rural areas. So we're excited about that. Again, we work with our hospitals to find out what we need, what they need, how can we help them. We partner with folks like you to see if we can brainstorm together and find a way to meet the needs of our rural communities. So I appreciate so much your time and attention. I think that's my last slide. I hope it is anyway, or you probably hope it is. This is my contact information in case anybody wants to get with us. Whatever you need, however we can be of assistance, whether you need something from us or you want to really work with us to address other needs, we stand ready to do that. And we so much appreciate the partnership with the Trauma Commission. And I will now shut up so that that you guys can get a break. Thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Great report. It sounds like you are really busy. I remember from your last presentation that it seems like you've gotten even busier than you were at that time. So congratulations.
Thank you.
We'll now move into the overview of the ACS trauma systems and consultative visit that we heard about this morning from Liz and Renee.
Thanks, Dr. Ashley. If you do need to approve the minutes and the 2023 meeting dates, your minutes are on page 4 in the packet, and then the meeting dates are on page 13.
Okay, let's backtrack again. We'll take the meeting minutes first. Anybody have any, well, first of all, can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Second. Okay, open for discussion, concerns, corrections. Seeing none, all in favor, none, all in favor. Aye. Okay, so carried it, so Liz, the minute carried. The approval for commission meeting dates. Can I get a motion? Any discussion?
The only caveat is with the August meeting, depending on what we work out, is whether it be the Wednesday or Thursday. Contract, you're flexible, just make that once, whatever we do that, so we can stay with them.
All right, we have a call, logistics, coming up, chat, okay, all those in favor? Aye. Vote. Okay, good.
Thank you. All right, I put my report or update on some of the initiatives on my banner for you. The only exciting news to say that our level 3, level 4 participated in that survey. Raise your hand. You out there did. Thank you. Your paper was accepted for publication, so we're excited about that. There's one revision, so thanks to Kelly Vaughn for serving as our wingman and getting all that revisions done. We're super excited about that. The ACS has now turned into a full trauma systems consult with a world focus review. So saying this over and over again, but I know it's still confusing. We initially embarked on doing a world focus review with the ACS, and it has turned into a full system consult with the world focus review. Primarily because the ACS needs to understand how rural interacts with the urban environments, to really understand the context of the system. So the Monday, January 9th, in your book schedule, and this is confirmed now because we have contracts with the venues that will be hosting the meetings at page 20. Monday, January 9th at Lake Blackshear is day 1, which is full system consult. It will have a panel of 9 surveyors who will be led by Dr. Brian Eastridge, chair of our College Surgery Committee on Trauma from the systems Pillar. And Dr. Pearson will also review the new chair of the role committee for the ACSCO2. So we're really excited to have a couple top reviewers. I will get to our website, soon to have it. All the reviewers and bios, who's actually coming into our state. I think looks like it's a great line of folks there. And then Tuesday, continue that'll be the start of the focus group. And that will be two on Tuesday. We're deal like last year. And it will be for South Georgia. So that would essentially be regions 5 through 9. And then Wednesday, the 11th, we move up to Cartersville, the Clarence Brown Conference Center. And that will be essentially the North Georgia focus. And I've said this a number of times. You know that like the North Georgia a little bit different. You saw the map that showed there's a lot of eastern and northernmost counties that are most rural. So, you know, things might not be the same as it is in South Georgia. So we just wanted you to have full access to this expert panel. I hope everybody takes advantage of that. We'll have sign-ups when we get all the information posted to our website. I will say that day one, we have a list of stakeholders that we must include for day one. So I'm still working with Renee and Michael through that list to get everybody identified that we need to have there. So we are gonna do like sort of a high fidelity, if you will, webinar piece for that so that everybody can be included. We're not sure how much space selection I have. I didn't see that we'll be able to accommodate everybody who wants to go, and I'm just putting it out there that we're gonna as we continue to work with development, and this will keep you apprised of that. So a lot of work to do. We're working closely with Renee and then Marie and then Michael to complete the pre-review questionnaire. Very similar to what you do for your ACS trauma center visit. Is just system perspective. So it's all data from intervention and on down to disaster emergency management and all that. So much important information. And any additional comments? We have a call coming up next week for us to get on, and then the week of the 28th, I think we have another touch point with ACS team. So Renee or Michael, anything else to add to that?
It's very slow process. Slow process.
Okay, then we'll move into the, start the committee reports. First up is the budget committee report, Dr. Rose.
Thank you, Dr. Ashley. The budget committee's prepared a number of documents that you have in your packets. 2 items that we will be bringing forth for vote for the full commission today. You received all of this information in your packets ahead of time. Hopefully you had a chance to look it over. Some of the standing things we'll go over fairly quickly because I know we have a packed agenda. I'd like to draw your attention to pages 3 and 4. It is the updated information on the super speeder. Go to the graph and then to the table. Just go to the next one. So I did want to draw your attention. We're overall 4% down from previous year super speeder revenue. It's graphically displayed there, and then you can see it on the table. We are monitoring this very closely, and the budget subcommittee will be meeting again on Monday. Katie's been tracking this month over month. We're brainstorming a little bit about some ideas we might have of educating people about what super speeder funds go towards. To see maybe if they're being a little bit lenient, renting tickets instead of or less staff. Yeah, we've heard that there's less staffing, so they're being pulled from traffic enforcement. So we'll be monitoring this very closely to see. We're hoping that that trend starts to go the other direction as the year progresses. But we will certainly keep the commission informed. This will be included in every packet for every commission meeting, and if anybody's interested beforehand, please reach out to us. We have this information to you as well. If you go to the next slide, Katie, it is page 5, yes. But it's the expense to budget report. It's very hard to see on your slides. It is contained in your packet. The only thing I want to draw your attention to here, and I think we've mentioned this before, is the contingency line items. We've had a number of expenditures, some unexpected expenditures, so we have utilized the majority of our contingency budget. But there are other areas where we're under budget for expenses, so we will be looking at reallocations for things. So we are again monitoring that in the budget subcommittee to make sure we are on track with covering our expenses, but everything else looks in alignment. Again, this is available to all commission members. At any time, will be included in your packets going forward. We will just bring your attention to any unusual or discrepancies or variances that we identify there. On the budget timeline, which is the next slide, we're on track with things. When our next commission meeting occurs, the session will be back in. We will need to vote on both the AFY proposed spend plan at our March meeting, and in all likelihood, we will have to have a call budget commission meeting to approve the reallocation of the current FY funding, as well as approve the FY24 budget sometime, probably in early April. And that's to ensure that we meet our targets and to be consistent with budget year-end closeout requirements for the state as well. Katie's done a tremendous amount of work pushing back the timeline of the budget and this whole process so that we are in compliance with those requirements and so that we are proactive in making decisions around our spending and our budgeting. So thank you, Katie, for all of that work. It's huge work that you don't see behind the scenes. The next slide covers, and I'm just going to refer to this, if Liz wants to make a comment or Katie wants to make a comment, we'll put a pause to do that. We do ask centers to report out what they use their readiness funding for. And you can see on the table here the highlighted areas that the majority of centers by level utilize those dollars for. If there's any comments that you want to make on that, any surprises that you saw, or any questions from the group? I'm not going to go over the 3-year open purchase order summary. We'll continue to include this in the packet for the commissioners. This again was a tremendous amount of work done by Katie to clean up old open purchase orders. As we've mentioned before, and I'm not going to belabor it, we had some purchase orders open back into 2016. All of that has been cleaned up. And now we have a process in place for monitoring those so we can ensure that doesn't happen. So this will be included, and then we'll do our report out annually in the fall after the full year closeout of the status. I'm learning more about state financing and budgeting than I ever thought I needed to know. All right, next I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Atkins so that she can review the performance-based pay criteria that we submitted for public comment and the final draft. This is the first item on our agenda that the budget subcommittee will be bringing for full vote by the commission.
Would just like to comment on some of these things may seem mundane, but that graphic we had with line our budget, commission budget process, and with the state government was huge because for the last several years, we get these calls from the governor's office of, we need the budget, what are you going to spend your money on, what are you going to do? And there's always this rush. And so now we're, as you said, moving it back. I guess you're wondering if we're going to make it earlier, not postponing it, moving that up. What we're doing as a commission is more in line with state government so that we have time to think logically and get committee reports and work through that process. So it seems like a small thing, but that's, I know that was not easy to do, Katie and all the people that made it happen. And then also the readiness funding, looking at our trauma centers, we're really trying to put, we really want to be process oriented and be able to show where the money goes and be able to answer our legislators and the legislative process. So So you're seeing more tables of like the one, slide one on page 28, where it talks about the use of the readiness funding for trauma centers. So I don't want anybody to feel picked on, whether it's EMS, whether it's the trauma centers, whether it's the vendors. Everybody is going through this process before we can show that we're good stewards of the funding. So it's starting to really take shape, so good work.
I have a question, just about the budget, just fireworks funding, is that any kind of percentage that we have to offset what the super speeders down down?
Well, I know, fireworks. And yes, the budget has some renewal, so do we need to cover unanticipated expenses, or returns of funding contingencies, or, are there relationships that we need to support like funds? So we do the budget on somebody that does on a monthly basis now. And so they're very aware of these things and are on top of these things, but that's a great point. We will expect the fireworks.
Thank you.
Hopefully there'll be more. Thank you very much.
For the PVP changes, I think this one is on. It's on. I mean, it's not like you can't hear me, but anyway, on page 37 in your packet, there's actually quite a few pages on PVP, mostly because we just wanted you to have all of the information, not just the criteria itself, but the percent at risk assigned, which really mostly stays the same. There's just some subtle changes for this year, and those are summarized on page 37. Primarily, we added the senior executive or designee, the trauma administrators group for the in-person piece, because we didn't have that spelled out for the winter meeting, and now that we know that's our annual in-person meeting for that group, we wanted to make sure that was clarified. One of the things we learned about level 4s was that just checking the NTD box on your demographic screen doesn't mean your record goes to NTD. So we want to make sure we want to try to incentivize level 4 centers to get their data to the NTD so that they can be included in the aggregate data for NTD. So we increased the risk a little bit there, because I believe we actually took one of the criteria away. So we kept the at-risk dollars per center level the same. It's always been that way for the last, I think, 4 years. 1 and 2 have been at 80%, 3s at 60, 4s at 19, and FERC at 50. And then because of the feedback really that you all gave, we added that national TQIP meeting attendance. So remember, this is for next year. It's not this TQIP meeting coming up in December, but that the TPM and or that the trauma performance improvement coordinator and the registrar should attend that. And we do have a carved out session for our TQIP meeting during that time. So we really want to get people. It doesn't make it worth our time to have a breakout meeting if we can't get people there. And then we also wanted to add some registrar education. You can't hear enough about this, that registrars are really the backbone of what we do. And if we're not making sure that they have completed those, the TQIP annual training, as well as the ongoing TQIP monthly educational opportunities that they provide, then we're not going to get the best out of our data. So we added that. And then I have also included, thank you for those who took the time to complete the survey, the feedback survey on the PDP. Most of it was like formatting, which thank you so much, because I've looked at this document a million times, so that's Steve. So I appreciate some of the feedback just on crafting clarity and what to make sure that the intentionality is there behind what the criteria was. So in terms of substantive feedback, mostly the two things that we got back were COT participation Should we continue with that? Dr. Ashton, I know we were gonna address that on the TMD call. I did, send that over to the TMD group. I think we're gonna maybe take that offline and I think we're gonna leave it in for this year, but get feedback on moving forward. And I know there's other things in play with getting Dr. Christie, in with the TMD group so he can, and the GQuip so we can hear kind of the feedback and, you know, we can figure out any comments from you. I know you were gonna talk.
No, I think that's good. We're getting started there. I think our state COT, when Dr. Dente was state chair of the American College of Surgeons Committee on Trauma, and now he's moved on to Region Chief, and Dr. Benji Christie and Macon, one of my faculty members, has taken over as the Georgia State Chair of the Committee on Trauma. Dr. Dente had worked to see how the state COT fits in with all the initiatives that are going from the Trauma Commission, GCPE, from OEMST. There was some, if you remember, there was some discussion there. And so we're trying to find the place and the role for the state COT. I think as trauma leaders, we need to support the state COT because many of us are on the national COT or go to those meetings or have gone to those meetings and participate at the national level. So I think we need to make sure that we're participating at the state level as well. So I think it's time to have all the players at the table, and the COT is sort of the last piece of that pie, if you will.
And then there was some clarification around large cause, and we did include it. You'll see sometimes we include things that we put at 0%, mostly because that's the way to get it on your radar. Because once the March Pause program gets rolled out, it is going to be an expectation. That will meet your annual requirement for 8 hours of clinical continuing education for your emergency medicine providers and APPs. So that will actually be helpful. And we plan to change that up so that we can do different case scenarios and make the correct content. And I think, all the other feedback was really, there was one about, there was one suggestion to make an annual disaster drill involvement, and I think like a statewide disaster drill, which is a fantastic idea, and would be music to the ears of our emergency management partners. And I think that's something that we could definitely consider. All this feedback we can take and put in for future iterations. And I would like to get this out to you earlier. Katie and I have put it higher up again as Regina mentioned, we are kind of bumping things up on our timeline just to give you more opportunity to have meaningful input into this. But for right now, because a lot of your attendance requirements are calendar year, we want to get this approved now. We're already in November, so a lot of this goes into effect January 1st, and will be in your FY 2024 contract. So we want you to have the best chance to have clarity on what the requirements are so that you can start making sure that you have your folks lined up for meetings who have to be at the various meetings, and however else we can support you. And Gabby's done a great job, like sending out meeting reminders and telling you where you are in your attendance, because the intent is not to again, it's just about, we can't have these meaningful conversations and discussions about where we take our system in the future if we don't have you all sitting here to really help guide that conversation. So
With that, any questions, or can you briefly review the change in the timeline for the PPP? You mentioned it starts in January, which is different than what we had. It used to be from a contract year, and the reason why we're pushing it back so that they have completed to submit it. I know you probably talked about that, but it might be worth just a brief reminder. I really don't, but it's important.
So yeah, so your PVP really starts the first of the year, and particularly with the attendance requirements. And we want to get to a prospective payment, if you will, similar to CMS. We talked about this. Your current performance is your future economic reality, is how CMS says it. We're from the government, we're here to help, but it just makes it easier on contracting. I do anticipate, we talked about getting you to biannual payments. We want you taking care of patients and doing all the things that our PTSF colleagues talked about today. We don't want you in a computer having to generate invoices and things like that. You know, I don't want to get the group too excited, but like even had some discussions with our colleagues from the Attorney General's office about, do we even need to have to invoice? Can we not just have it set up so that once you meet certain things, you just get your automatic payment? So we'll have much more discussion around that because it just seems like our invoicing process is, it's a little cumbersome for us, and I'm sure it's not easy for you. It wasn't easy for me when I had to do it too. So we want to fix that. And then your payment, you'll already know what you're going to get for the following fiscal year. It'll already be determined. So we're not hustling to get scorecards in and all that stuff to figure out what your final payment is. Your scorecard will determine what your next fiscal year contract is. And ideally, it would be divided up into 2 payments. If we could potentially bear the pain of having one payment, and it might be 1 year that's a little tough because you might have to pay until the end of the year. We could even feasibly do it as a one payment thing, so you're kind of one and done. But more discussions, and we'll have to get your input as we continue to work on what the options in reality are.
Yeah. So thank you. Yes, on behalf of the budget subcommittee and this board to the full commission for a vote.
Okay, so from today, we don't need a motion, so it's open for discussion. All right, hearing none, I'll call. So, all those in favor of the, I guess the motion from the committee? Aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I'm gonna write that one in, but it's good.
You can add that. I trust you. Okay.
All right, thank you. Budget committee has one other item for the commission to vote on today. You received in your packets, there were 5 centers that were eligible to submit a request for a one-time payment for equivalent to readiness. You'll see. What? Liz is holding the microphone. My apologies for those in the audience. Contained in the commission packets, there are 5 applications from currently unfunded trauma designated or verified trauma centers who submitted a request for funding in the equivalency of readiness and registry funding. The AU Children's Hospital, which is a level 2, Doctors Hospital, and Augusta, which is a 2. I'm going to get the rest of them wrong. Piedmont Cartersville is a 3. Wellstar Cobb is a 3, and Fairview Park is a 3. So those are the 5 centers that submitted their requests. You have the details, the commissioners, in your packet of what it is they would like to utilize the funding for. In exchange for funding, there are performance-based pay and requirements or deliverables for that. I will bring forth a motion on behalf of the committee so there can be discussion about these applications.
Okay, that's all now for discussion. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, then we'll vote. All those in favor of the motion, aye. Opposed? Okay, there it is.
Thank you very much. That concludes the report from the budget.
Okay, thank you, Regina. We'll move now into the EMS committee report. Courtney.
Let's be short and sweet, because I have a suggestion. Is this on?
I don't hear you very well.
Nobody wants.
Now you're going to take it on. Yeah, maybe move a little closer.
About
That's better. That's better.
So my report on page 48, essentially removing all the things that we had in the plan, the next, the last budget piece of our process now is the equipment grant. We have revised the application that we did based on some concerns that were expressed last year's grant. That wording has been changed, and I think we'll send that out for any comment. And as soon as we receive or don't receive, we know what happens. I think that grant process will be initiated. That will be the last big piece of our spending. We don't need that for those now. It's all information. We've already had the budget approved for all of those different things, and just try to move it through as possible.
And then, I think, Courtney, last of the morning session was sort of not least, level 3 and level 4 roll call center committee. Dr. Patterson.
Thanks, sir. Thank you for the committee for actually kind of monopolizing the morning a little bit with some of our projects. Just from our report, March pause process or program is ongoing. I think I've had the first pilot program as of now with 2 other pilot programs scheduled for later this year and early next year. So hopefully we'll have a report to give as we kind of continue to roll out revisions over the next 2 pilots, and hopefully we'll be able to give a much better report coming up at the February meeting. You've pretty much seen and talked about this morning the more pilot rural focused visit now that's been morphed into a full system consult with a rural focus. You've heard about that. I won't belabor those points, but this is coming up January 9th through the 11th, as Liz had just talked about. You actually had a great presentation this morning on the PTSF level 4 consultative visit, which we have a lot of work to do and digest that over the next several months. We'll have some things to put together for strategic value coming up in February at our next meeting. Readiness call survey you've heard about also this morning. Dr. Ashley did a great job at the American Association for Sugar and Trauma and the podium presentation, which was well received. I think Georgia has become pretty much the expert in looking at cost surveys and looking at cost for all the level trauma centers now. And of course, as you said, Liz had said earlier, it's been accepted for publication. I think we received that email 2 days ago. Our access to specialty care we updated last meeting in August, and we'll hopefully provide another update as things change across the state with a QR code thanks to Gina and having this out for people to use. Web-based registry contracted abstraction services. We had reported last August that everyone had received funding for their amended fiscal year 2022 budget, and we have that in place as of this time. And PI projects we put on hold in line for the upcoming level 4 site visit. I think we'll probably try to redo some of that over the next several months to kind of put together actually just really a PI project in place at every institution and kind of formalize that before we take on any projects. And really, that's all I have to report, sir.
Okay, well, that's a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the day.
Okay. All right, we will conclude the morning session, and I think lunch is available. And we'll start back at 1:15 with the Attorney General update. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I hope everyone got finished with their lunch. Please go ahead and finish up. Before, I didn't make the announcement this morning, but I wanted to follow up with one item left on the agenda that I didn't touch on. Dr. Patterson mentioned, I think Liz mentioned the fact that the level 3, level 4 Rural Trauma Center Committee, the paper has been accepted for publication to the Journal of Trauma. That'll be coming in for final edits and going to production within the next couple of months. I don't know when it'll be published, probably at least 3 months. That's just a guess. But for those of you all that might have known Dr. Haley, Leon Haley from Grady, who unfortunately passed away, I think within the last year from a jet ski accident down in Florida. He was one of the founding members of the commission. And at that time was an ER position at Grady, and I think had already risen to the level of senior vice president at that time. And if you knew Leon, he was just a great guy, and well respected by the trauma community, the folks at Grady, and certainly the trauma commission. He was with us when we started the process and the methodology where we came up with the idea of doing a survey to actually put in definitions with the, what are the ACS criteria for level 1, level 2, and now we've advanced that on to 3s and 4s. But what does that look like on paper? How do we come up with a survey that tells you how you can define cost, or where we're all playing on the same page? He was one of the founding members of that discussion, that methodology, and that survey. Leon left Grady and went to be dean of one of the medical schools, and then eventually president of one of the hospitals in Jacksonville, the CEO. And so we really was on a fast track to leadership, and we wanted to honor him in some way. And so in the paper, we're going to name, and we haven't quite figured out just the verbiage on how this will be listed, but either the methodology or the survey tool after Dr. Hagan. So in that paper, his name will forever be attached to what we've done here at George and Gilbert recognized. So no acceptance. All right, we'll move on in, Dan, to the legislative new business update. And joking with Dan at the break, it's probably not fair to put the legal update right after lunch. I'm totally through the short straw, but I'm sure Dan will do a great job and keep us going here. So Dan, welcome back to the commission.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ashley. Thank you, everybody, for having me here today. It's really an honor to be able to speak to you about peer review because of the importance of the work that this commission does and the value that peer review can have in helping the commission continue to meet its mission. My name is Dan Walsh, and I'm with the Georgia Attorney General's office. With me today is Michelle Williams with the law firm of Baker Donaldson. Michelle has been working as a Special Assistant Attorney General to the Trauma Commission on peer review. Michelle and I have been working with Liz Atkins and Gina Solomon. Obviously, you know who they are, but I'll just, for the record, say Executive Director of the Trauma Commission, and Gina Solomon is the Director of the Georgia Quality Improvement Program, or QUIP, or GQuIP. Together, we have developed the proposed Trauma Commission resolution to create the Trauma Best Practices Commission and other directives. The resolution has been provided as part of your packets, and it's displayed on the screen. Before walking through the individual paragraphs of the resolution, I wanted to provide a brief context for its purpose. In short, the goal is to further improve the quality of trauma care and achieve greater patient safety through peer review. To grind down on that point a little bit further, the goal is to further fulfill certain statutory directives by establishing programs where peers in the trauma network can openly discuss their experiences, their thoughts on what has not worked, what has worked, and what could work better, and engage in these discussions with a level of specificity to be constructive while still protecting confidential patient data. And a committee created by this commission as part of the proposed resolution would have the benefit of participating in these discussions and the opportunity to collect and analyze relevant data, so we'll be able to formulate recommendations for quality improvement and patient safety to be presented as part of the commission's annual report to the state. And with that, I'll turn now to the resolution. There are some introductory whereas clauses as part of the resolution. The first whereas clause essentially states the mission of the Trauma Care Network Commission, which is to improve and enhance the safety and quality of trauma services in Georgia. In the next whereas clause, the resolution identifies the statutory bases for the Trauma Commission to take the steps that are outlined in this resolution. So from the long list of trauma commission duties and responsibilities that are set forth in Georgia law, the resolution identifies 3 responsibilities in particular. In summary, the provisions direct the commission to establish, maintain, and administer a trauma center network, to coordinate and assist in the collection of data for the purpose of evaluating trauma care, and to study the provision of care to determine best practices and identify where changes can be made. The last 3 whereas provisions say what it is the commission wants. And that is to establish a committee to fulfill the statutory responsibilities that I just walked through, to establish its best practices and methods, trauma services, and patient safety operations into a formally designated patient safety organization, and to expand GQIP to be responsible for achieving that designation. Okay, so that takes us through what the commission wants and the statutory basis for what it wants as set forth in the resolution. Now we get into the meat of the resolution where it explains what exactly the commission is resolving to do and how it will achieve these goals. In number 1, which is near the bottom of page 1, the resolution provides for the creation of the Trauma Best Practices Committee as authorized in the commission bylaws. This is the committee that was referenced in the whereas clause as part of what the commission was wanting to do. This committee will implement and carry out the commission's statutory quality and patient safety mandates. Moving down to paragraph 2 at the very bottom of page 1, the commission designates the members of the committee. There are 3 voting members of the committee. Would be the GQIP Trauma Medical Director, the GQIP Surgical Medical Director, and the GQIP Director in an ex officio position. Turning now to page 2 of the resolution and paragraph number 3, the commission authorizes the committee to designate other professionals with expertise to join in the committee as non-voting members or guests. So the 3 members identified in paragraph 2 would remain the only committee members with votes, but the potential to bring this additional expertise in to the committee can inform the votes of the voting members. In paragraph 4, the committee is authorized to conduct meetings, to develop and maintain programs, to collect, review, benchmark, and analyze data. Now, this, of course, is a crucial part of the resolution. Being able to analyze data and establish benchmarks will help the committee identify problems where they see centers that are not meeting the benchmarks. In paragraph 5, the committee is authorized to expand GQIP. And then carrying this thought over to paragraph 6 in more detail, the commission authorizes the committee, either directly or through GQIP, to form volunteer advisory committees of trauma services, clinical professionals, and administrators. These clinical professionals and administrators will advise on committee trauma practice and patient safety activities and assist with the review of data when required. Further, the commission authorizes GQIP, when ready, to apply for recognition by the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality as a publicly listed component patient safety organization, for which the commission agrees as part of the resolution to serve as a parent organization. The Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality is the lead federal agency charged with improving the safety and quality of healthcare. Moving now to paragraph 8, the commission directs the committee and its programs to prepare and maintain reports, records, correspondence, data registries, and other materials to develop best trauma care practices and methods. In paragraph 9, the committee is directed to maintain the GQIP and additional programs, policies, and internal operations in a manner which promotes and protects candid discussions among network peers, the commission, and others pursuant to the protections of peer review, patient safety, and other applicable privileges. Earlier, I mentioned the establishment of benchmarks and identifying problems where those benchmarks are not met. The candid discussion that this paragraph of the resolution mentions, it could hopefully flesh out why a center is falling short of a benchmark, and there can be a back and forth on how to address any issues that were spotted. Georgia law provides a statutory basis for protecting the confidentiality of peer review proceedings and documents. In paragraph 10, the executive director is authorized to retain necessary consultants and advisors. And finally, in paragraph 11, the commission requests the committee to make recommendations for quality improvement and patient safety to it for the discussion and to finalize such recommendations for inclusion in the commission's annual report to the state. If I could now turn your attention to the proposed Trauma Network Commission proposed organizational chart. I can highlight for you where the proposed change would be if this resolution is adopted. As you can see, front and center on the chart is the Georgia Trauma Care Network Commission. Under the commission are a row of commission committees. And on the far left side of this row, you'll see in the dotted line indicating that the committee is not presently in existence, the Trauma Best Practices Committee. Below this committee is GQIP. As mentioned in the resolution, the committee is authorized to maintain programs including but not limited to GQIP. And as I mentioned, the committee is also authorized directly or through GQIP to form volunteer advisory committees. And this explains why in the proposed organizational chart, GQIP is shown below the Trauma Best Practices Committee. That concludes the presentation of the resolution. We will endeavor to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dan. The floor is open for questions, comments.
Thank you very much for spelling all that out. That was very, very helpful. I guess the question when you're dealing with performance improvement is HIPAA issues, correct? So if this committee is going to be dealing with holding centers or evaluating centers in regards to their benchmarking capability and whether or not they're meeting their benchmarks, I would assume that all the data that the GQIP committee would get is going to be de-identified patient data. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. So we're not dealing with any HIPAA violations here at that point, because then the committee. So we should be okay from a HIPAA standpoint, correct?
Yes, HIPAA does not apply to the commission or to the committee.
Meaning we can gain access to individual patient records?
I'm not saying that there's not confidential. There are confidential obligations when you have personal health information, but HIPAA as a statute is not applicable to the commission or to the committee. There are other confidentiality statutes that would be in play, but not HIPAA.
Okay, all right, great. And then what was my last question? I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I commend y'all for doing so much work to put the resolution in place legally to protect trauma centers and to protect stakeholders and give everyone a safe place to talk about quality, to where everything is protected and it's well lined out here. So I think we've already been doing a lot of this, but now it's just at a more sophisticated professional level, I guess is the way legally to where everyone is absolutely protected and it's a well-organized place to be. So I think that's how I would describe the trauma best practices. Thank you, Dan, and everybody that worked on that with you to go through that.
Thank you.
So can I ask a question?
Sure, absolutely, Gordon.
The way I'm reading this, do I get this was all done so they could do peer reviews that actually look at records to know what happened? So So, and that would not be discovered. We could have peer-to-peer conversations. Put all cars on the table, so to speak, so then figure out what happens. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that's a fair statement.
Okay. So as far as this committee is concerned, then the trauma best practices committee would report back to this group.
Yes, that would be, I think, near the end of the resolution. I believe it's in the last paragraph. It says the commission requests the committee make recommendations for quality improvement and patient safety, and to finalize such recommendations for inclusion in the commission's annual report to the state. So yes, the committee would provide recommendations to this commission.
I think what you're talking about, Courtney, is on page 68. There's,
68.
Look at that organizational chart, and it shows the commission committee.
Yeah.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
As far as the direct line, the trauma best practices group is a direct line up. So I would assume that that would be the reporting mechanism here instead of, in the past, it's been the G-QUIP group. So the way I'm reading this now, G-QUIP would report to the trauma best practices group, who then report to us.
I think that Michelle, I had a clarification on that.
I'm Michelle. The commission can ask any box on there to make a report to it. So if you all wanted a report from G-QUIP, y'all could have a report from G-QUIP. If you want a report from the committee, you can have a report from the committee. The commission should ask whoever they think has the information or the recommendation, make a recommendation to it. But the way we're anticipating that peer review recommendations would be is that they would come from the best practices committee. But if you have information that you want to put a report on, they can do that. Does that make sense?
It does, it just, flow chart is,
I think the way I'm looking at it is, I think the way you're looking at it too, Courtney, and that is, it almost seems like the G-QUIP and the trauma best practices boxes should be flipped. We already get reports from G-QUIP, and the trauma best practices would be informing G-QUIP, or I guess it might be.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the trauma best practices group is G-QUIP.
Right.
Is it not? It's the three voting members, the medical director, the surgical director, and then Gina.
Yeah, it gives you a structure. G-QUIP is where the information will be and a lot of the work will be done.
Right.
But they need somebody to, if you will, above them to coordinate all of that. So when G-QUIP gets more information or needs more people, G-QUIP right now is relatively small.
Right.
And I think what we're anticipating is as these programs get up and running, there's going to need to be a little bit of coordination among these programs. I know every time we talk, there are more programs that Gina and Liz want to do to help the network.
So it expands the role of the G-QUIP. Basically, my understanding is the trauma best practices committee are those three voting members and anybody else as advisory people, but it's essentially the same box. It's just an expanded box. Those people have the ability to expand their own box. Am I?
Like what we think of as G-QUIP now will move up to the box. The three of them who are doing the work will move up to this newly formed committee that will become the patient safety organization, and that will be the coordinator of the efforts and activities. And then G-QUIP, as we call it, will look very different because that group will expand and will be looking at what are the initiatives or benchmarks from a state perspective under the peer protection to be able to have these conversations. So
There'll be a lot of
right now
people
they
on that
serve
doing
both
work.
boxes,
Yes.
which they shouldn't. G-QUIP can't do we need, what this, that system committee will do. We need them to move up and be that oversight committee who coordinates and facilitates based on the initiatives set forth by the commission. And then the worker groups that actually look at the patients, look at the flow, look at the data, make recommendations, look for trends, and report up through what we now call GQuip. So really GQuip's two boxes. We're gonna give them what they should be,
Right.
elevate them, and then have that work group, which is gonna significantly expand because there are lots of projects. We just need to make sure that we have the protection that was appropriate for us to get to that next level. You know, we've really been looking at data and benchmarks and stuff without, I guess we have sort of protection. This really formalizes it. So as we continue to expand and grow, we can be comfortable having those conversations.
Got it.
This does not mean that you don't have protection right now at all. But what this does is put it in on paper, in writing, and there'll be policies below that.
It just formalizes the process, and now there's absolutely no question about it, because,
Formalize and the structure.
Right, what you've already been doing.
right, okay, great.
I did want to make one clarification. When we talk about HIPAA, I don't want anyone to think that the trauma centers are not bound by HIPAA. They are, absolutely.
Right.
But the commission itself is not.
Right.
Good questions. Any other questions? Yeah, does anybody from the audience have questions?
This affects the way you guys share cases and hopefully is a structure with which you can feel comfortable. When we start to share case information.
Nobody likes to talk when the lawyers are here. We can leave.
I mean, confirm or deny that I have a question.
So just to specify, so if I'm a trauma center, what's gonna be my interaction or responsibility with the trauma services practice group or the GQuip group when it comes to patient-specific information? Or are we gonna be dealing with de-identified data, so it doesn't really matter?
A good example is probably what you were working for with transfers, sometimes different care. So they're looking at
Okay.
issues, but so if I were bringing a case, if they identified through their data, they're like, what happened to this? Yeah, I mean, so they'll send me the registry number. I mean, I can discuss the case without telling me who it was.
Right.
I don't have to tell you the patient's name, the date of birth, you know, the zip codes, those things that are the elements that are PHI. We can still discuss the elements of the quality components of the case in a de-identified fashion. And we really haven't, I mean, they've done that in small groups, but in our larger groups, we've looked at aggregate TQIP data.
That's
and
correct.
odds ratios and things like that. But I think as we start to ditch to door times, where our delays, getting in there and talking about centers, you know, okay, in the last month I had 12 cases and it took X amount of time, what were the barriers? But I need to be able to bring those cases in a de-identified manner to talk about it.
Okay.
That's, I mean, feel free, that's sort of how I envision us moving forward into the next level to really bring in case-specific discussions, but case-specific discussions based on predetermined benchmarks. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I think and Dr. Todd and I talked, please feel free to chime in, and Gina's up here, and, you know, with Michelle and Dan, is that we still need to formalize a lot of this. What you're looking at today in the resolution up for consideration just creates that structure with which we can be protected by, and then we'll work out process-wise what that all will be talked about. We need like at least 100 phone calls.
And
We just don't get them.
think about the Arbormetrics project and how this fits in, because GQuip has
Right.
access to data. So this will protect that. So whereas each center will see Arbormetrics from their center perspective, GQuip will have access to the entire system perspective, and we'll be able to drill down into that. So like this protects that whole part of our work within that, because we will have access to that data.
Excellent, excellent.
Yes, we have a data flow chart, but we didn't want to like,
Overwhelm
it's even more in the weeds, but yes, so.
But if you like, Dan can pop it up in about 3 hours.
I'm good, thanks.
This flow chart perhaps took the most time.
Okay, good question. Any further discussion? This is really a lot of what we've already been doing. This is just putting a very tight boundary around where I thought we were already protected. Georgia has such great laws for peer review and protection and quality and all that. But this just removes any doubt and makes it a very safe place for us to do our work and do what we've already been doing, in my opinion. It's totally unofficial legal opinion, but that's the way Redneck Concert looks at it. So anyway, I think we're in a good protected spot here.
Assistant Attorney General. What'd you say? Is there such?
I don't know.
An apprentice?
We would love to have
an
you aboard.
apprentice?
I can might fall a lot if you let me on the legal team, so. All right, well then with no further discussion, we need to vote on that. So we'll call to vote. All those in favor of the resolution as presented? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, great work. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move into the Georgia Committee for Trauma Excellence. Jesse Gibson.
Thank you, Dr. Ashley, and thanks to the commission. So as you guys have heard over the last couple of years, our GCTE subcommittees continue to work on the 3 initiatives that we came up with that would help support much of the work that's going on in other groups across the state. So as a reminder, the 3 initiatives are to decrease time to definitive care, decrease incidence of acute kidney injury, and to increase awareness of trauma in our state. So you guys have a full report in front of you. I'm not going to read it each detail, but I did want to highlight a couple of things. So the pediatric education registry and PI subcommittees are all working on things that impact time to definitive care. That work involves improving the data, which we've talked about as a barrier in the past few meetings. Also involves some education for what definitive care means to some of our rural facilities, you know, the non-trauma centers and some of those. Just kind of trying to educate them on the importance of getting patients to the higher level trauma centers in a timely manner. Also, just those groups are reviewing the care of the patients like what we just talked about, and of course that's in advance as we move forward. Also, the education and PI subcommittees are both working on tools to decrease the incidence of AKI. Both are kind of early in the work of that, and as you all know, that the AKI thing's been a beast for us as an entire state. So they're taking small bites at the problem, but hopefully can report more progress in the future. The injury prevention subcommittee, they have done a really great job at increasing trauma awareness for our communities across the state. They've done this through social media, events, and also a lot of virtual education. So I really applaud that group for all of their efforts. And then in addition to the work that's going on towards the initiatives, there's a few other things I wanted to mention. The pediatric subcommittee continues to work on pediatric readiness. That, as you all know, or as most of you know, when we move to the gray book, there is a good bit of information about pediatric readiness in that book. And so their subcommittee is working on some tools that we can all use moving forward to meet those requirements. The education subcommittee did have some funding left over last year. They were actually able to purchase TCRN tools, a couple of little books for each trauma center in the state to take. And what we're really trying to do there is to increase our rate of TCRN certified nurses across the state. So good use of funding there. And then our registry subcommittee, they have been working on a lot, working in partnership with the Department of Public Health on some things related to the biospatial site that we've all heard about, just kind of trying to learn how to best utilize that data. They're also working on updating their GCTE contact lists to add a line in there for us all to know who to reach out to if we need follow-up information on a patient that we sent somewhere or that sent to us. So a lot of work by that committee. And then finally, I just want to say this is actually my last time to you guys. I will be moving off the hot seat starting January 1. Tracy Johns is going to be taking over as the chair of GCTE. And yesterday during our meeting, we voted on our new vice chair, and that is, I think Lynn is here, but Lynn Grant from Fairview Park is going to be the new vice chair. which we're all excited about because Lynn will represent the level 3 centers, and I think that's a good thing as we continue to talk all day long about rural and the 3 and 4 centers. And I think that's just going to be a really good way to continue the partnership that we're all doing a lot of work around. So thank you guys for the opportunity. It's been a true pleasure and a learning experience for me. So unless you guys have questions, that's it.
Jesse, we'd just like to thank you for a great job. I know chairing that committee is a lot of work, and we know it is. And so we just publicly want to acknowledge you and thank you for that. And also Region 2 for their outstanding Northeast Georgia Trauma Symposium. It was just, as usual, jam up this year. It was even better than last year. So congratulations.
Well, thank you so much.
And now it's not on the agenda, but we have a special award the commission would like to present to a very, very special stakeholder. And I'm going to ask Crystal to come forward and do the presentation.
I'm going to just hold this for just a second. So we've been trying to do this for a while, to be honest. A little secret squirrel stuff was going on, and all of a sudden, out of just great fortitude, somebody sent me an email last week, and I realized that we could actually make this happen today. So we're going to make this happen. So we're about to recognize a Injury Prevention Excellence Award. And it's going to be presented on behalf of the Georgia Trauma Commission and the Georgia Committee on Trauma Excellence. And so we want to talk today about Dr. Need, Dr. Sharon Need. All right, so most of you know her. She served as the program director for the Injury Prevention and Research Center, or IPRICE at Emory, that we all know and have worked with for many, many years. She has the distinct benefit of being able to transition and pass the torch to the next IPRICE director, Jill, who's here with us today. So glad she's here and able to be a part of this. While at IPRICE, Sharon coordinated various programs with the center that address the 5 top injury challenges of Georgia. She provides oversight to all the IPRICE task forces. She is a long member of our injury prevention community and a partner to the Georgia Trauma System. She has served as IPRICE's liaison to the Georgia Trauma Commission and is a member of the Georgia Committee on Trauma Excellence Injury Prevention Subcommittee. She is transitioning to a new role at Emory. We're not going to completely let her go. We're going to continue to keep her close, and she continues to support the injury prevention community. She continues to be a mentor to us, a partner to us, as she provides insight. And we're just so glad that she sent me an email last week and said, I'm coming, and are you going to be there too? And so by golly, we've been wanting to do this for quite a while, and so we're glad that you sent that email, because Dr. Need, you have provided invaluable service to the state of Georgia and to our trauma system. And so we want to present you with this Injury Prevention Excellence Award. Oh.
I think my red shoes on today. Oh, they look gorgeous on the red carpet. It's like you're a movie star.
Well, I just want to thank everybody. This has been wonderful for me. I have thoroughly enjoyed working with all of you. And I'm so proud of how you brought injury prevention to the forefront. I think it's been great. This is a tremendous mission. And I have been very impressed with your work. Thank you so much.
That shoes out with the red shoes. I would look forward to the red shoes.
Yeah, I'm not gonna wear those today. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Rice, we'll move into the Trauma Administrators Committee.
Thank you, sir.
just a few updates. We've had multiple work group meetings, particularly with our diversion work group. So this coming, or excuse me, the week after Thanksgiving, there'll be some education or some links coming out for the administrators to ensure they have the right people connected to the GCC website, the issues for updates, both at a regional level and the state level. So that will be coming out. And then the trauma transfer diversion option, which will only be visible to trauma centers, have to log in to see it, will be available for trauma centers to say they are not able to take transfer patients. There was a lot of challenges within regions of every center being on trauma diversion or center diversion or transfer diversion, and then smaller rural facilities not being able to get patients out. So that was really where that came from, was led at that work group level. So we presented both at the work group level and at the committee level. In conjunction with that, it may come out at the same time, we're hoping, maybe not. The work group decided to work on a best practices document. Thank you, Amy, for that. And so they are putting that together to be able to share within all the centers some best practices, leading practices around patient movement and throughput. So that will hopefully be coming out shortly there with that. The third piece is, and this is the work that now has to happen, it's very nice to be able to communicate, but now what do we do with that communication? And it's nice at the state level if there's some mass casualty event, a hurricane or something like that, but really where this needs to live is in the region. It's very hard for somebody in Atlanta or Savannah or Macon to be telling another region what they need to be doing. So ideally, we will then move into regional communication plans so that within the region, hospitals will be able to communicate their status, whether it's trauma center diversion, total diversion, whatever that is, and that's really where that needs to live. That will need to happen in conjunction, most likely, with our GHA partners, because this doesn't just impact trauma centers. This is going to impact any hospital in Georgia that wants to send patients. And so we know not everybody is in a trauma center, that they might be all over the place. So those are some of the big pieces that are coming related to the throughput diversion work group. The other piece, our finance committee. So we finally have a chair to work with Regina, and it will be Billy Wright, who is our VP of Finance. At Grady, he actually came from Gwinnett, so worked with Gina for years. He and Siobhan on that team, so very familiar with trauma centers. And they actually worked with UB40 and all that with Gina, so I'm very excited about that connection to work with Regina to be able to get that committee up and running. Although Regina's been doing a tremendous amount of work already at Augusta, so I don't know if you want to share anything else. Gotta put you on the spot, sorry.
Well, we started some work. So what we're trying to develop from the Administrative Finance Committee is a finance dashboard at the recommendation of the TCAA finance work group in education that we had at Barnsley. And in lieu of that, in response to that, sorry, we were trying to work together to help identify those benchmarks that we would like centers to monitor and track. And so we were trying to develop a sample benchmark. But it'd be very helpful to have the group from Gwinnett that's very experienced. What I was telling Michelle a little earlier is that it's like talking to people in a foreign language. They're ambassadors from another country, because I'll ask them for something and they'll be like, what are you talking about? And then they'll respond and I'll be like, what are you talking about? We don't talk the same language. I know what I want and they know what they have, but there we need to bridge the gap. Looking at denials, accommodation codes, the 6-8X revenue codes, how are you doing them, what's your denominator, that kind of thing. So hopefully we'll get close to have a sample for folks to look at, and when we work out all the bugs of what to ask for and what to track and what to look at to ensure centers are maximizing their financial health, then we'll share that with everybody and have you be able to implement that at your own centers as well.
Thank you so much. Our next meeting will be in person, Chateau Lawn. It is part of our main performance, so hopefully every administrator will be there or representative. The last thing that's further along on your agenda, we will be giving a brief overview of the Georgia Coordinating Center. Today, Lori Wood, our Director of Emergency Management, is presenting that virtually, but you'll be able to see that just to give the whole center, or excuse me, all of you all a great update.
She's on now.
Oh, that would be great.
Want to see that?
if she's ready.
We need to make sure
Can I
we can hear
recycle
her.
back to that version issue?
Yes, sir.
So, because I don't really understand. So you talked about the trauma centers, you have to go in and look at who's on the version. You don't come up with a standard for what this version.
That is Courtney just asked if there's a standard for the version. No, sir, there is not. We would love for there to be. I do believe that that is one of the great conversations in the back that we've had on that work group is we have to standardize because it really is based off of individual preference, center preference. So that is something that will sit within this. Again, that's something because the GCC website is not just trauma centers, it's centers across the whole state that use it. We would need to engage GHA partners or DPH to pull folks in to have that conversation. But it's a very important conversation that we need to have.
Well, I guess I'm not trying to be too often, man. We've been needing that.
So we've been in for a very, very long time, yes. 100% agree.
So the other point is if we talk about all the GHA folks need to be involved, I'm just going to tell you that this is live. Okay? So if the trauma centers start going on diversion, if the trauma centers go on diversion for our transfer, we're not taking transfer. When you take what's going to happen, hospitals can say, hey, take it directly there. So the whole concept of being able to take somebody to a level 4 center where evaluations and maybe not go to a level 1 center, to stay there or go to another, it's going to go out. Because if that hospital takes a critical patient they can't get out, they're going to say, hey, take it home.
No, that's a really good point. And I think part of that is where that regional plan is going to come in. It's very hard. Each region's a little different hospitals, different types of hospitals, and we need each region to come together and decide what is that going to look like. Well, prior to AMC's closure, we had a great plan of we would never go beyond total diversion at the same time. And so we would always, one of us was always taking patients. And that was really a regional focus. And that's really, the team feels like that's where that needs to live, to try to direct that from a state level. Just, there's too many nuances and too many differences to be able to direct that. So we'll be engaging all the level 1s, ideally, in that process, and then looking at the southern counties and how we can help support them, probably more of the level 2s that are that direction. So I think it's a very important point, 100%. And it's a long-standing Georgia issue that we've had as long as I've been a part of emergency medicine and trauma. Would love feedback when we get to that point, particularly from our level 3s and 4s that need to send patients out. And then, you'll see with the GCC, we've done it with COVID. We're starting to do it for pediatrics and doing a little bit of that coordinating and helping people find hospitals to go to, but then transport becomes the issue, as you've already recognized. So some big problems here that aren't solved yet, but we're at least stepping in the right direction.
I like that idea about in Region 3, AMC and Grady never being on that you all just work that out, not the commission, not anybody else, just y'all work that out.
Dr. Todd and the team.
I think that's great work, because that's sort of obsolete now, but maybe with all the level 1s, maybe, and having the administrators, because that's a pay grade above me and Jim and the trauma directors at those places, having the administrators in the room that could say, all 4 level 1s are not going to be on at the same time on diversion, and a way to call each other than me and Jim and Regina Shop texting back and forth at 10 o'clock at night. Hey, are you going on? I'm going on diversion. Are you on diversion? And us trying to work it out, we need a more formal process. Right. And so that would be great if you could formalize that with the big boys and girls in the room. It would help us a lot down at the ER level where we're trying to manage patients.
And part of that is a communication platform that doesn't exist today, other than everybody texting each other. So What is that communication platform that we can use to ensure communication? And this is really where, as we think about, the level 3, 4 overview this morning just really glaringly showed our gaps. And I think this is where part of that has to fit in, is how do we as a trauma system support trauma care in Georgia, not just in our own systems and our own single sites, but if we're really going to make improvement, this really has to be a statewide effort. And I think this is a piece of it. It's not the whole thing, but it definitely is a piece of it to begin the process. Okay.
And Lori's slides are up, so Lori, if you can unmute and see if we can hear you.
Hey, good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon, we can hear you.
All right, excellent. My name is Lori Wood. I'm the Executive Director of Emergency Management at Grady, and I've been with the health system for 11 years. I oversee emergency management and the GCC operations. If you can go to the next slide. I'm sure everyone is very familiar with Grady's flood on December 7th, 2019. And after being on diversion for a week, we needed to come off diversion to give some relief to the other hospitals in the area. And we needed to create a way to manage our medical patients. Since we lost all of our medical beds, we need to be able to manage that EMS influx. So we looked at several different models in the country that route EMS and kind of developed our own hybrid. And so we launched what was then the Regional Coordinating Center on December 13th. And, you know, we worked and we met with all the other hospitals in the metro area. We wanted to make sure they were comfortable with the process. We wanted to ensure transparency and visibility. And as part of this process, we created a new state website for diversion reporting. And then when COVID hit, the governor asked that we expand the scope of the Georgia again, that's when we became the Georgia Coordinating Center. And we began managing transfers, assisting with patient placement for hospitals throughout the state, COVID and non-COVID patients, just because everybody was so overwhelmed. And the GCC was also serving as the transfer center for the Georgia World Congress Center admissions. Next slide, please. This is a brief overview of the process that happens when EMS calls the GCC. Typically, it is a scene-based 911 call. Crew calls the GCC with some very basic information, the desired destination facility, and then the GCC operators consider the level of situational awareness they have to what's happening at that preferred destination facility as to what advice they're going to give that crew. How many transports have gone to that facility in the last hour or two, what the acuity was. And then, you know, there's been instances where an ED has been without a CT machine that they've relayed that to the GCC. So all of that awareness is taken into consideration as they're recommending a destination facility for the patient. You can go to the next slide. And just to be clear, patient preference always takes priority. If the patient says, I want to go to St. Joe, I don't want to go anywhere else, that's where they're going. So to date, as of yesterday, the GCC has fielded 382,000 EMS calls. Over the last year, the service area has expanded. Initially, we started just with hospitals inside the perimeter, but EMS has started calling for hospitals outside the perimeter, and the GCC has been contacted by hospitals outside the perimeter and said, hey, we want our EMS partners to call through you. Can we do that? Absolutely. The majority of the hospitals are in the metro area. We're starting to see some calls coming in for transports to Columbus, to Macon, and even Rome, some of these outlying areas. Next call, please. Next slide, please. A lot of concerns came up when we first started the GCC about the time it would take and what the capacity was for our operators to handle. We're seeing almost 18,000 calls a month. It takes less than 9 seconds to answer the calls. Once they get a basic report from the EMS crew, the transfer to the receiving facility, under 5 seconds. Total call time, including reports, to the receiving facility is 1 minute and 44 seconds. That's our average. Almost 97% of our calls are from initiation to completion, meaning we're losing, call drops, hangups, any call interruption, less than 3% of those calls. Next slide. Thank you. This is the 2022 data. This is up through October, and the end of October for transports. And these are the majority of the hospitals. This is not all inclusive of all the hospitals, just the bulk of the calls and the division of transports across the metro. And you can get down in the weeds on that. It's broken down by type of call, whether it's medical, trauma, behavioral health, and so on. Next slide, please. Trauma transfer diversion has been obviously requested as a added status. We're ready to launch that. It's built in the website. It's very simple. You log in, your user logs in, and it's just simply another drop down, however long you want to be on trauma transfer diversion. Next slide, please. This is the view that it would be for your hospital and for your transfer center or your it's your inside hospital folks that are going to be able to see this view that says trauma transfer diversion for another 4 hours, another 2 hours, whatever that length of time is. Unable to accept transfers. Very simple. Next slide. Oops. Sorry, I seem to have missed a slide there. My apologies. The public view of this and the EMS view of the trauma transfer diversion is not visible. So EMS is not going to log in, or excuse me, EMS is not going to be able to go to the website and see where it says trauma transfer diversion. The reason for that is we did not want to confuse EMS and have them think that that might mean the hospital was on trauma diversion. So this is internal hospital operations only that have this view that says trauma transfer diversion. Okay, now next slide. Thank you. We have been charged with for expanding across the state by the governor's office. We are in the process of increasing the capacity for call volume. Right now, we can have a maximum of 15 operators on at one time. We're expanding that to 32. I think strategically the best way to expand our reach is to focus on those high volume EMS regions. And also with that comes improved technology, which is in process. It'll give us better visibility into real-time wall times. And the program that we're going with is for Image Trend, and it's able to pull data from EPCRs, a little bit delayed, a little bit of lag time on those wall times, but it'll give us a better visibility into how long EMS is waiting at the hospital, how long they're sitting on that wall, to again provide more situational awareness to help EMS make those appropriate decisions. There will also be a hospital portal so you can see what's inbound to your hospital. And then there's also a component for mass casualty, multi-casualty patient tracking. And I will be happy to answer any questions.
You know how often somebody calls for advice on a hospital and you send them to someplace that's not their preferred choice?
I'm sorry, I did not hear the question. My audio is not great from the room.
So if I'm an EMS guy and I said, well, I want to go to Keystone, and how often do you say, well, Keystone's on the verge, you go somewhere else?
How often? Well, it's a discussion. It's not simply a Keystone's on diversion, so you can't go there. it's a discussion with EMS. Hey, Kennestone's on diversion. They, this is the situation happening there. They've gotten, 10, level ones in the last 10 minutes. Maybe we can find somewhere better for your patient.
Ask it differently. How often do they go to a different hospital than what they requested initially?
That's not a metric that we're tracking, because a lot of the calls are simply, hey, this is where I am. I'm at, Decatur and Piedmont. What's going to be my best destination for this flu, for this trauma? And it's not a metric we're tracking. I'm hopeful with the new software, it's something we'll be able to track. Now, however, I do know that the EPCR, the crew should document if they are diverted by a facility.
Any other questions from the group?
Well, that was a great overview. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, looks like we'll move into the Trauma Systems Performance Committee. Dr. Dunn.
Thank you, Dr. Ashley. The Trauma Systems Committee really is trying to better understand the ditch to door metric, and that's been the kind of the golden crown or whatever what we're trying to accomplish. And so there's been a lot of work that's taken place over the several months or almost 6 months that we started this process, probably almost over a year now. We hit a little couple road bumps. We have been unable to pull data from the state data set right now because they're undergoing a massive conversion from EOS to ImageTrend. And so we're in phase 2 of that. The state office has worked out all the bugs on how to make that happen from EOS to ImageTrend. They went through a pilot project with phase 1 and that went pretty smoothly. Now they've expanded that to other hospitals. They're into phase 2 and that is going fairly well from what I understand, but we're going to be unable to really pull any data out. We got a really good pull, a very, very small sample size initially when we started this project, but it was too small to make any global recommendations or to make any policies or recommendations. So we needed a larger sample set. So we're waiting for this, the ImageTrend transfer to be complete. And then with the help of Gina and her group, we'll be able to pull a larger set of data. The state office has done an amazing job of working on this conversion process. It's a huge task, as you can well imagine, but we're kind of in limbo until that process completes. And we hope to have that process completed soon, but I do not have a time frame as to the final completion of that process, unfortunately. The other issue in the meantime that we were working on was the armband project to try to get us the same information in a different avenue, and that was, in short, when a patient was in the ditch, they would get an armband with a specific number on them placed, and then that number would follow them through their first EMS to their critical access hospital, and then from their critical access hospital to their second EMS, and then their EMS to their definitive care. And we'd be able to track that patient and link all those records together so that we could figure out their ditch to door time. We are still trying to get the pilot project off the ground. Once again, we hit another hurdle with the program manager that was in charge of that process. That position is in limbo right now. And we're still trying to do education with a specific region because you have to really hit everybody. You have to hit fire, you have to hit police, you have to hit EMS, so they all understand what that armband looks like, and what it means, and more importantly, where to record it on their individual flow sheets, whether the EMS or the hospital. And so we're working with GTC to help figure out a place in the trauma flow sheet or in the registry to put that so that we can pull that data. A lot of moving parts, unfortunately. So bottom line is we don't have any new data for you now, but I'm hopeful that by the beginning of next year, we'll be able to at least begin to tackle that. I think in the meantime, because trauma surgeons tend to be very impatient, Dr. Ashley and I are working on a separate project where we're going to look at our own region, Region 5 and Region 9, and use our own indigenous trauma registry to probably get a little bit better snapshot of at least those two regions from ditch to door. And so we can at least have some preliminary data that we can begin working with and then compare it to the previous data that we had and see if we see any similarities and any differences, and then try to begin to work on fixes or mitigation strategies for those. But I will tell you, one of the big issues that we've already talked about before is the lack of EMS availability for transports. You know, when they get to the level 4s, getting them out of the level 4s to the level 1s is a huge challenge. Even at the critical access hospitals, sometimes they're spending 4, 6, 8 hours there because they don't have transport. And that, you know, the more rural you get, the more big of a problem that becomes. May not be much of an issue in Atlanta, but it's a huge issue in South Georgia. So it's probably a huge issue all across the state. So we are still tracking this. This is not put on the shelf or the back burner by any means, but we're just waiting for a little bit more access to more data so that we can hopefully get to the bottom of this. That's my report. And I'll be happy to ask any questions or answer any questions.
Any questions for Dr. Dunn? All right, thank you, Jim. And we have the Trauma Medical Directors Committee report. The Dr. Bassey or Dr. Cole? Dr. Cole? She's on the now. Dr. Cole, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can, I'm clear. Welcome to the commission meeting.
I apologize for not being there in person. With the transition for me, it's been a little difficult, but I am able to give you the update from the Trauma Medical Directors Committee meeting that we had this past Tuesday, actually. So again, okay, so we again reinvigorated this committee meeting. It's in conjunction every quarterly with the GQIP meeting. We're still trying to figure out exactly what topics we want to discuss and what are the main focuses. Like some of the other topics we've talked about today, the GCC updates, we had Lori on to kind of give us an update for the trauma medical directors about what was, you know, being added with the trauma diversion for transfers, what that means, how it relates to the gray book again, with relation to that hours counting towards your total diversion hours. And then there were some comments, you know, depending on what level center you're at, whether you're at a 4 or a 1, you know, there's different resources you have available at different times. And we know that most hospitals have been strapped recently for those resources. And while you might be at a level 1 center, you might need that trauma diversion because you may not have a nurse to take care of the transfer that may be coming in. And so we're trying to figure out how this will look from a definition standpoint. And I think if we come up with a definition as a group for what that truly means and we use it all comparatively, it'll help with kind of trying to get some of that surge and spread out the volume of where we're going to be putting patients. And so that's kind of where most of our issues that we discussed. As you can see in the report from last time, we did have a WhatsApp set up. I know it has been used at least twice in regards to trying to get patients to centers when they felt like there was a significant need. So I think that's a starting point for some sort of communicative device between facilities for trauma medical directors. And then the last thing that we're going to be working on still is working on a contact list for the different trauma centers, what resources are available, and then redrafting that letter that was sent, I believe, back in 2014 about what the expectations are for some of the critical access hospitals, the smaller level 4 hospitals, of what's acceptable for transfer, when you should be transferring, and how you kind of can reach out. And those are the things that we're working on. And again, we'll meet again quarterly. And we just had our last one on Tuesday. Any questions that I can answer?
Dr. Kohler, Dr. Dunn here. Just something to think about as far as for new initiatives for the TMD committee. We heard from the Pennsylvania Trauma Foundation this morning about their findings at level 4s. And one of the things that was surprising to me actually was that they were recommending, not surprising, but humbling, is that the Pennsylvania Trauma Foundation was recommending that there be more of a collaborative approach between the level 4s and their and a higher level center, whether it be a 2 or a 1, to increase the flow of information back and forth, not only for PI, but for practice management guidelines, mentoring other TMDs, those types of things. And maybe we can figure out how to formalize that process with the TMD committee and just try to get a process in place for that. Because I think that was a really good recommendation, and certainly something that I'm going to try to take back to my region. But I don't know if that would be something, just something for food for thought.
I definitely agree with that. And I will say, prior to AMC's closure, when we had all of our hospitals in the WellStar network, we actually did have a meeting with those trauma hospitals, and we were sharing guidelines back and forth between the centers. And I do think it was helpful because they would present cases that a level 4 saw or level 3 saw. They would present them, and then they would get feedback on what would we have done differently, how fast or slow the transfer should have happened, should you have done X, Y, or Z maybe. And it actually helped some of their folks how we think about things as well, and vice versa, and why they did what they did because of the resources that they have. So I do think that there's something we can look for to add to that committee.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Fuller, this is Michelle. I think just great work, and I think maybe when I can find some time to chat, see how we can maybe make sure that we're both tackling the throughput diversion. I think we've got great partners, administrators and our physicians, and just added some other frontline people, and I think we could probably really tackle this from all sides. So we can find some time in December for us to meet, maybe chat about it.
Definitely agree.
Okay, any other questions for Dr. Kohler? Okay, Dr. Kohler, thanks for signing in. We appreciate you.
Thank y'all.
All right, we have time built in the schedule for a 10-minute break, and then we'll reconvene at 2:35. First up on the last session is Cheryl Ward from the Georgia Trauma Foundation. Cheryl?
As it relates to our report, I won't go over the first activity listed because it's the grant funded project that we're working on with the State Office of Rural Health, and they already addressed it during their presentation. What you all will recall is that we have engaged with fundraising consultant Alexander Haas. We're working with them on activities 2 and 3 that are listed on the report. Now, as it relates to providing support to the state's trauma system, they have recommended that we start out by committing to 2 action paths. We know that there are a lot of needs within the system, so where we start is going to be just that. It's us starting with something. The first action path they recommended that we focus on is for 2 fundraising priorities. One is going to be short-term, and the short-term project is where we can raise money quickly and get some immediate results. The other will be a longer-term project that will show sustained impact. Our board right now is narrowing down the projects that we will work on, and we're going to make sure that we do those in alignment with the priorities of the commission. The second action path that they are recommending is adopting 3 board leadership development strategies. And those strategies are specifically designed to help us broaden our recruitment pool and to expand our reach across the state. I know that most of you know the greatest hurdle that we face in accomplishing the 2 fundraising priorities is that people don't know the impact of trauma, or that we even exist to support improving trauma care here in the state. So one way that we can overcome that hurdle is by engaging in a public awareness campaign about trauma and trauma as a public health issue. Alexander Haas is helping us with messaging, and that messaging is going to be the center of everything that we do. And right now that boils down to 2 words, and those 2 words are minutes matter. Minutes matter. So for those of you here in this room, we know that you work within the trauma community. You're aware that minutes matter, but most people don't really realize how crucial minutes are. So it's going to be up to us to convey that message as we work to raise the profile of the foundation and the work of our trauma centers. The message minute matters is key when it comes to trauma. It's key because what happens is we can build content around it when we're looking for either corporate or grant funding. We can build content around it when we're seeking board members or we're promoting trauma education, or even when we're advocating under the gold zone. It's a message that we can use when we create or actually simply support trauma programs. So by the end of the year, we will have an elevator speech and talking points that help advance that message. And then following that, we're going to build that message into everything that we do. The messaging is just going to be the first part of designing a public awareness campaign. We will share more with you about the public awareness campaign as we develop it. Keep in mind that while the foundation will probably be the face of a lot of this work, we're going to be the ones to put the message out there. It's not going to be about us. We're not doing this to talk about us. We're doing it to let people know about you and the important work that you do, because we want them to realize that we're supporting you as you work to make the best trauma care possible for everybody who lives here in the state. Any questions?
That's a great report, Cheryl. That's a lot of, that's probably the most impressive report we've heard from the foundation, I think, with that kind of projection. So kudos to all the hard work. I like minutes matter, and then getting word out and doing education, because I think the public doesn't really understand where they need to be, and we need to get them there. So, any questions, Dr. Dunn?
Yeah, Cheryl, so as you develop your messaging campaign and you start to raise awareness of the trauma as a whole, will that message then be tied to funding opportunities? We won't be just a public service announcement that trauma is a serious public health concern. Just be aware. We're going to tie it to. There's a next step. You can now donate money to.
We're gonna build that messaging into everything. So that's when I said that it's key and you can build content around it. That means that I can use that to shape the foundation of the message that we're putting forth, no matter what we're doing. So yes, it'll be a key component to
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions for Cheryl? Okay, thanks, Cheryl. Okay, we'll move into the Georgia Quality Improvement Program. Dr. Todd and Gina Solomon.
Well, first off, thank you for the resolution passing. I think I'm really excited about how that's going to shape our work going forward with it. So I'll try to keep the T-Clip update brief from that standpoint. So in our report, the work groups have been a little bit slow. Everybody's got competing demands, so we're going to kind of revisit our focus with some of those. The TBI work group did receive the large participant use files from T-Clip, so we have the big files for 4 years, and Dr. Blabber, our research fellow, is going to do some analysis with Dr. Benjamin on that, comparing our data to the larger T-Clip files. So a lot of interesting things to come on that for that. The benchmarking and central site, I'm going to save that for last, just a little bit with that. The peer protection you heard today, the resolution, we're continuing to work with, that was just the first long list that we will work on regarding that protection, and as we move forward with seeking the ESO designation, which will help us even more. And our advisory committee does meet. They've had input on some of the work we're doing around our Metrics project and our winter meeting coming up. So we got a pretty great schedule already planned for that. The benchmarking platform, you have a couple of slides in your packet. I am excited to say that our central site went live on the 27th of September. And we have data from just about all of the centers. We have actually right now over 68,000 records in the central site, which is very, very exciting. And this is the first step as we move forward with the ARM metrics for that. But one of the great things about the central site as well that I wanted to share is, you can go to the next slide, sorry. You're right on cue, is they have not only the central site, but the centers have access to the ESO driller, which is really just this high level analysis of the data that's in there demographics, injury patterns, those kind of things, so we can take a look at a snapshot. So like this is just a screenshot from out of the central site. You can see what our primary mechanisms are by rate, and then you can see the fatality rate by that particular mechanism. And you can sort this by center, by year, by month. So it provides some great data. Next slide. And here's just another example, ISS scorecard or fatality rates for ISS, which is kind of a no-brainer, but there's just lots of stuff in. So I'm encouraging the centers, they have access to this for their own data that they can utilize. So it's kind of definitely a bonus for that. The next slide. The Arbormetrics update, we are right on schedule with that. So we hope to go live in second quarter of 2023. Is the plan. So we have completed an initial list of process outcomes and filters that we want to work with Arbormetrics. And we actually have a meeting with them on December 1st and some stakeholders within the state to discuss what we pulled together. What do our definitions want to be around there? Do they meet our needs? They have pulled in the work that had already been done for NTQuip because they said absolutely you can share. So some of those analytics have already been met with that. So you go to the next slide. And these are just lists. We have process measures that we want to look at based on some projects that we identified, like the time to care is, that's definitely top on our radar, but some other things that we got out of polling from within our GQuip meetings that our stakeholders feel are important with that. Next one. Outcome measures the same way. And what questions do we want to answer? So either things we saw in our collaborative report we needed to work on from that standpoint. And then the last one was filter. So how do we want to slice things? We'll actually have the ability to slice by region. These process and outcomes with that. Activation levels, center levels, diagnosis cohorts. So this is what we're meeting with them on December 1st with a larger stakeholder group to kind of really go through and clarify what these look like and what we want to see. So feel free to talk.
Yeah, I would just two additional comments that kind of tie into what Jeannie was saying. I think the first is the work groups continue to progress. I think our goal probably is in the winter meeting to sunset a couple of work groups. I think the one thing we've seen with work groups is they tackle really large focuses, AKI, TBI, they're just so multifactorial. The likelihood of us actually impacting things and driving process change and outcome change is pretty unlikely. I think the one thing that's nice with Arbormetrics is looking more at those process measures. And Tracy and I were just talking about that. You really focus on the process measures. They're really black and white. Do you do this within this time frame? Yes or no? Not so much stuff so grand, but more granular. I think we'll be able to make a lot more headway if we focus on the work groups and process measures, and then the outcomes come from beyond that. So I think we're going to focus a little more on that. The other thing I think that allows us to do is hopefully game plan will be coming in the day of trial next year to have part of that day actually be peer review. And actually have that with closed session with the room and all of those key stack. Really spend time doing some peer review and drilling down some charts based on these process measures, what we see coming out of Arbormetrics. The thing I like about that is if we do that and we make those changes in process measures, we look at Arbormetrics 3 months later and actually should see an impact on what we're outcome measures just take so much more than these multifactorial. So I think that's the direction we're headed in. We'll talk more about it next week and also with the GQuip collaborators. So happy to trade questions.
And one other thing I'd like to add, just to tag on to all we heard with the level 4, is the Arbormetrics is going to play a huge part into what the level 4s are able to look at and actually get some risk adjusted benchmarking. I hope will help them tremendously with their PI process for that and be a great tool for them.
From looking at data and then getting in a room and going, wow, we probably ought to tweak this to sort them, and then in 3 months being able to look at our data instead of waiting for a year and a half or a year, that will be huge. So it'll allow you all to be more nimble and guide us how we can tweak things. So very exciting.
One quick question, Gina. So it all comes down to, the risk-adjusted models, right? So we know that TQuip has a secret risk-adjusted model, and I'm sure Arbormetrics has a separate risk-adjusted model. So my concern is, is that we're trying to improve our TQIP reports. But if we're going to use Arbor-Metrics to, our AKI is super high. So we're doing all this work to change our AKI, and then we realize in our TQIP report, based on a different risk adjustment model, it's either worse or not as bad. So how are we going to, handle those different risk adjusted models?
Well, I think that's a really good question, because you're right, I'm sure Arbor-Metrics has a different secret sauce, because TQIP is proprietary, but my guess is they're similar, because those are, the same things are gonna feed into those vital signs, those comorbidities, the complications, the age, the gender, the race, we know what some of those are that
Right.
feed into that. And we've always said that TQIP is not obsolete because of Arbor-Metrics. I think they're both two different tools that may be a little bit different, but will be useful to help drive that. And we may learn more about TQIP and their analytics as we analyze with a different platform before that. Because like I said, Michigan does the same thing, like they use both platforms. So I think they will just complement each other in the end.
Yeah, and the nice thing about Arbor-Metrics is, TQIP sometimes changes their benchmarking, levels. One day it's VAP, and then it's TBI VAP, or then it's severe TBI and TBI. And so you're trying to make all these changes, and then the next TQIP report, the categories are all changed. And so it's super frustrating. Arbor-Metrics will allow us to stay on track, and we can pull data whenever we want to, which is going to be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move into the next report from the Office of EMS and Trauma, Michael Johnson and Renee.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to, with Candy Clark, report a line of duty death today in Forsyth County. Paramedic has been licensed with Georgia for 12 years. Lost her life this morning in a tragic accident responding to a call. So please remember her family and her coworkers in your thoughts and prayers. Secondly, I would like to introduce Xavier Crockett. He is the new Director for Health Protection, and he has graciously come to learn more about the trauma system and show his support for making this a concerted effort to improve trauma care in the state. As you know, we had this assessment in August. This assessment was planned and before COVID. So way before my time, and finally in August, during the transition time from David leaving and me taking over, we had the NHTSA assessment, the first one we've had since 1995. So they called it a reassessment. I called it an assessment since it was so new to us. So I told them, I said, this couldn't come at a worse time because I'm new. It couldn't come at a better time because I'm new. So we're trying to still wrap our heads around it and learn what we need to glean from that. But that is available on our website. That is the first item you get to on our homepage, and you can download it. Dr. Ashley, you were the first one I sent to outside of EPH, so I hope you had a chance to look over. But just a quick overview, and I want to thank Liz for being there and helping present at the NHTSA assessment on the trauma side. Thank you very much. And Nina Ham from the State Office of Rural Health, thank you for the information you sent, all the grant money that goes to the EMS community to help better EMS care in that area. So we do thank you. So the assessment looked at 11 areas. And within those 11 areas, there were 3 sections. The standard, which is the national standard, the status of Georgia, and then recommendations to us. And those 11 areas were regulation and policy, resource management, human resources and education, transportation, facilities, communications, trauma systems. But in Georgia's case, it was the systems of care, since we have cardiac, stroke, and soon to be pediatric readiness center. And then public information, education, and prevention, medical direction, preparedness, and evaluations. Like I said, that is on our website. We encourage you to go look at it. We are still looking at it. And like I said, we're trying to figure out what my role is and learn the job well, because I don't like to make rash decisions. I like to make informed decisions. So if you have any questions after you look at it, please don't hesitate to contact me. And let's talk through it and try to answer questions the best we can. And I'm gonna have Kelly come and give you a quick update on the Farmland project.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And I know Dr. Dunn gave a gracious report earlier on the RMAN, just to give you an update from since that meeting. The RMAN project, as you know, has been funded by the Governor's Office of Highway Safety for us to try to link crash records with the EMS records and hospital records so we can get the whole big picture. I did have a meeting with law enforcement yesterday. We had planned on this project starting this month. Had a few snafus in it. Our lead law enforcement officer got put in the hospital, which kind of delayed our initial law enforcement meeting. And then our trauma manager, not trauma manager, EMS data manager, who was the project lead on this, left us. So we got a little bit behind, and like I said, we met with law enforcement yesterday. I have another meeting with the commander in the law enforcement arena next week. That we are pretty sure that's going to seal the law enforcement participation side of this. I've talked with Jesse at Northeast Georgia Health System, who is the hospital system that's going to be involved. She asked, please wait until after our site review, our site visit before you start this. And we said, yes, we can do that. So hopefully by mid-December, we will start the education so that we can start the project in January. Which in some respects works good because then we start at the beginning of the year to get this going. Hopefully, we're going to see the full project come to fruition and work. But the one thing I also think about, if we're not able to get the crash records linked with the EMS and hospital records, that at least we'll have the EMS and hospital records linked. So that we can finish getting 100% of that time of care metrics. But that's just to give you an update on that. And we are now moving forward and hope to get this off the ground in January. And then, Renee?
We've been pretty busy towards the end of the year with quarterly reports and working out marine needs like a month vacation on a cruise with no computers. With all the data stuff that she's been doing. We've done several redesignations, several of the hospitals that had their re-verifications through the college, and those type visits have been going on constantly. Still waiting on a lot of reports. We did a review for a new level 3, which I don't think is any secret that Henry General, well, it's Piedmont Henry, went through their review, waiting on those results. So just a lot of stuff still being busy work. I would like to say that I want to brag on Fairview Park Hospital. They did something that's not been done in Georgia, and I'm so proud of them. They actually had a consultative visit, and I was present for that. And the consultative visit so well that they verified from the consultative visit, and that's not ever been done in Georgia. So I'm very proud of them and the work they've done there. Lynn is one of my sidekicks on for the level 3s and performance measures and those type things for the site visits, and she does a lot of them with me. We've got some new members, and I did have one request, and this may be something that the trauma medical directors group may want to look into as well, and kind of get with our office with the EMS medical directors, but they're very interested in some of the pre-hospital components with the blood products and TXA and things like that, to get involved in some of that, because they're seeing some things in some of these rural areas that I really feel like they need to be talking to each other on, the EMS medical directors and the trauma medical directors. So that, maybe if we can get that rolling in the future, that would be something really good to partner with that group. So that's kind of all in a nutshell. You've heard everything most all day long, so unless you have questions about anywhere we're going.
Renee, what levels and how many of each level have gone through the designation process, say in the past 6 to 8 months?
Well, some of them have been re-verification visits and consults, I mean, for the threes, not really, but, we've had 2 new level 4s, the Southwest Georgia LaGrange, Spalding, well, it's not Spalding, and Griffin, they're new level 4. Then we have Henry, so that gap that was in Region 4 is now kind of at where they need to be at least. We don't have a final report on Henry yet, but the visit went well. So we've had those 3 new ones.
And those are level 4s, correct?
Look, Henry will be a 3.
Okay.
And the other 2 were level 4s.
And was level 3, did the American College participate in that as well?
No, they did strictly state visit.
That was strictly state visit, okay. Okay.
So, and we've got several more facilities that have called and been interested. We've been talking to some, but you know, it's one of those things I can always tell when a hospital has a board meeting. Because I get like 5 calls the day after. And so I usually just tell them to designate one person to communicate, and we send them information and talk to them about what's provided. And, you know, I have to I'll follow back up with them, but generally it's, you know, they'll call me back and say, we've decided to wait, or we just don't have the resources right now. And I have utilized some of my surgeons to have meetings and go meet with those particular facilities like Dr. Ashley's done before. But I've done that quite frequently here lately with some of the other centers to give the surgeons and whoever the specialty here is a little bit of insight as to what the role will be, so they can ask those questions. So it's, you know, it's been really good, and there's been, you know, quite a bit of sort of stimulation into the system in the last few years, especially for the rural hospitals. So we're thinking on those. Thank you.
Hey, Renee.
Yes.
I'm just curious, while Dr. Dunn was asking too, who were the centers that had redesignation visits?
The ones that had redesignation visits?
Yeah, you mentioned several redesignation visits and new designations.
Some of them were the ACS visits. We kind of got off track with some of the redesignation visits because of the Pennsylvania review, because I was trying to set dates for that. And then, I mean, that kind of delayed because I didn't feel like having to I didn't feel like it was right to do those centers when they're having to prepare for that other. So, you know, Pennsylvania didn't make it clear they did not want to use that data for the state visits.
Right.
But I think we can at least maybe not duplicate some of that information. But still, I've got to set those visits up that were already behind and that was scheduled. So there's
that was the 4s.
That was the 4s. Most all of the 3s are catching up. Because one of the ones I just did the other week was Cobb for their redesignation. So it's getting, we're still trying to get momentum back from COVID.
Okay, thank you, Renee. Any other questions? Okay. Dr. Wallace, did you sort of include the GCC in the report while ago? Or-
Lori's presentation.
That's what I thought.
Yes,
So
sir. Yes, sir.
thought that would be hard to top with the slide. Good information there. But if you needed more time, I was going to give it to you. Okay. All right. I have no new business that's come to my attention, so I have nothing else to add. Any other things from the commission members that didn't make the agenda? Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Okay. Thank you all.